So this is the Sherborn Advisory Committee meeting of January 31st, 2024. Welcome, everybody. Appreciate people who are joining us to talk about budgets. We'll do this in our pretty much our usual order. I'll read the agenda in just a minute, do a vote on that, and then we'll get going on stuff. So let me do a screen share and pop the agenda up, and there's Mike Flanagan. All right, so we will start with liaison reports. We'll approve minutes, hopefully, from our last meeting, and then we'll get to budget review. And the one change relative to what's here is we're going to do DPW operating budget first rather than last. So we'll pull that one up to the top if everyone is okay with that, and then we'll do the rest in the order that they are here. And that is it for tonight's business with Farm Pond, Conservation Commission, Sustainability Department, Planning Board, Board of Health, and DPW at the beginning. Anybody with any other changes to propose to the agenda? If everybody's good with that, then I would welcome a motion to accept and approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Second?
A second.
Thanks. Okay, and quick roll call. Nora?
Aye.
Penn?
Aye.
Shelley?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Wasim?
Aye.
Mike W?
Aye.
Natalie?
Aye.
Mike Flanagan?
Aye.
And I am aye as well, so that gets us to 9-0 on that. Great. So for the liaison reports, let me just give a kind of preview of coming attractions, and then we'll pick up anything else that's coming. So we added this meeting in, so didn't get a break. So meeting this week, also meeting next week. Next week on February 7th, we'll be talking to the chiefs about police, fire. I think we'll be doing both operating and capital budgets, and we'll torture Sean and make him come back again to talk about his capital items at that meeting. And Jeremy very kindly agreed to do the kind of background on the capital budget that I think he did for the capital budget committee and that he did for the select board. And he'll do that for us as well next Wednesday to kind of provide context, background, and how does the whole capital budget fit together, to start with that before we get to considering and discussing individual budgets and specific budget requests. February 14th, so 2 weeks from tonight, is our joint meeting with Dover Warrant and the Sherborn and regional school committees. And that meeting takes place in the Dover Sherborn Middle School in person, not on Zoom. I think they do a live stream, but there is not an opportunity to participate remotely in that meeting. Then we get a week off for school vacation week, and then on February 28th and March 6th, we're back to discuss warrant articles and any remaining capital items that we haven't gotten to. So there are a few other capital items that we won't get to next week that we can pick up in those last couple meetings. And that will be it before we get to the public hearing. Okay, so with that preview, anybody else on advisory with any liaison reports, anything to bring back to the group? Penn?
I just want to let you know that I'm still in the process of exchanging emails with the Historical Commission on their sign budgeting.
Okay, sounds good. And anybody else? Nora?
Wasim and I are having 2 separate meetings via Zoom with the fire department, Chief Ward. So I have a meeting tomorrow at 10:30 in the morning, and Wasim is, I believe, meeting on Monday. I don't know. I don't want to speak for you, Wasim, but we'll be going over that.
And that's just kind of budget review ahead of
Yes.
next week's. Yeah, perfect. That's great. That's excellent. Yeah, and I guess Hasn't been scheduled, but, you know, there'd been talk with the Dover warrant folks that Paul, Mike, W, and I would try to meet with them sometime before that February 14th meeting to kind of compare notes. So I will shoot them an email, and reach out to them on that and see if we can get something scheduled. There's always do we do it in Sherborn? Do we do it in Dover? So the last times I met with him, we met in Natick, and we've sort of gone to neutral territory, but we'll see how that goes. I'll also mention I will either later tonight or tomorrow forward an email that Jeremy sent to me that will reference I think Massachusetts Municipal Association kind of lunchtime webinar on municipal budgeting, which some of us on advisory might be interested in listening in, and I'll send that around just so everybody knows about it. And if you're interested, you can join in. Anything else on announcements or liaison stuff before we get going on budgets? Okay, well then let's go. Sean, thank you for joining us. Would you like me to share that document? What's best for you?
It's best if you share, because I'm at home on my laptop and that messes with me. I could do it, but
Okay, happy to do it. Give me just 1 second to get myself set up to do that.
while you're doing that, for people that either are or are not familiar with my budget, we have, I'll say always, but for a long time, we've had 5 budgets rolled into one. Just the way the accounting numbers lined up. This year, in an attempt to try to confuse everyone, all at the same time, we're working to combine them. So I submitted it, and then Deb did a phenomenal job kind of reorganizing it. Everyone that remembers last year or the previous years, that there was, like 5 or 6 different tabs to the spreadsheet, and then a roll-up tab. So a lot of the movement here is combination of different line items that were, or similar line items that were in different budgets. So there's some that look like a huge increase, and I caution you because then there's probably an offsetting decrease for most of those lines. And then this year, Deb still has them showing the old accounts, the 421, 420, 422, 429. I believe they're all going to be one other than snow and ice. That's why we're still showing that separate at the bottom. It always rolled up to one number for their overall budget. Snow and ice, I'll remind everyone before we even get into it, we don't mess with that. I tried several years ago, got told to sit back down and don't touch it. So the only real increases in snow and ice come from the COLA, from the overtime line. Everything else stays the same. And obviously we almost always overrun it. The number is so low, it would be almost impossible to not overrun it. A winter we don't have is still a winter of snow. Once or twice, ice. We're beyond it now, I can assure you, with what we ordered this week for salt, the overtime coming in. So that's really small for me to see. I don't know if anyone else is able to read it.
Let's see if we can make it. Let me see if I can make it bigger.
I could blow it up under view options on Zoom.
Right. If need be. I mean, there's not a whole lot to talk about. You might actually want to, I don't know if you want to flip to the other form. There's not much to see. The Form 5, for those that actually look at those, is equally as confusing. Because I basically had to leave last year alone as far as what we did, but then essentially move people around, because there was the employee that was still the sole person in land management. He didn't go anywhere. He just goes to the similar job description in the main budget, and as does his stipend, because he's also the tree warden. So it's just going to move out of the 429. It doesn't mean I hired anyone. We do anticipate going back to full staff. There is one movement in here Um, to finally fill the foreman. That hasn't happened yet, but that's budgeted in here.
Sean, was that budgeted in last year too, or is that it was zeroed out last year and now it's being budgeted in?
Zeroed out last year.
Yeah, okay.
And we don't anticipate that being an additional employee. That's a movement within the department.
But would that person's current position then be backfilled or not?
Well, again, to keep it simple, we're going to get to full staff, which would be 8 employees.
Okay,
I don't want to talk that much more about something that hasn't happened.
yeah, of course. But so currently at 7 and full staff would be 8. Is that more or less the right way to think about it? Yeah, okay. All makes sense. Just want to make sure I understand. That's great. Thanks.
And then maybe flip back to the
Yep.
main budget, unless people have specific questions there. Again, that rolls up into basically the top third of this. And then the middle of the body of the department is, you see a lot of zeros. Deb, myself and Deb, we left the accounts that are basically going to die off, so that they'd still be there for the history. There's a couple where you see the negative 100s. That's where it netted out and combined with another one. Police, I'm trying to look at one. Police details is one of them. Where it looks like a huge increase, it actually just moved. There was a land management police detail and a general police detail. So they get combined. That's about all I really have. There's not much to it.
Okay.
Is there any specific questions?
Anybody want to start with anything?
Sean, maybe you already spoke to this with the things moving around, but the skilled labor, what's the jump from last year to this year? Is that one of the position? What is that?
So the main
Like,
jump is the
yeah.
fact that everybody's landing in one line item where the sole person that was in the 429 group, which was the land management,
Okay.
just moves into that category. It's the
Okay.
same.
The land. Okay.
It was just in 2 different budgets, so to
I mean,
speak.
that incorporates a number of people. It's skilled labor, right? So there's more than one person that's represented by that line item, right?
Bulk of the guys. So
Got it. Okay.
there's a negative offset,
got it.
basically.
Sean,
Maybe you could describe your staff, your staff, and you
Yeah.
have a foreman, a mechanic, and then the rest are skilled laborers, essentially.
You just did. Yeah, that's how we're running right. Basically right now without the foreman. So that in the future, that's what we expect it to be. Myself, there's a mechanic who's the fleet mechanic. He works on our stuff. He works on the police vehicles, the fire vehicles. And then a handful of skilled laborers. And so one of those employees we expect to become the foreman.
okay. So there'd be then 5 skilled laborers typically if you're fully staffed.
Six.
6.
You'd have 8 employees. One would be the fleet mechanic. One
Oh,
would be
yeah. Okay. So
foreman.
it's
Eight does not include Sean.
yeah. Got it. I got it.
Correct.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. Perfect. Okay.
Just one thing of note: those 8 employees, the laborers, are part of a collective bargaining unit, and they're coming up on the end of a 3-year term. We've opened negotiations, but don't have anything that we can report on that. But just wanted to let you know that that is in process.
The
So
current,
going into FY25, we currently do not have an agreement reached yet, but we've just begun negotiations.
and so the new contract would be 25, 26, and 27.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. And Sean, is it a fair summary of I think I've got this, but of the kind of the labor piece? Basically, there's some COLA, some increases just of that sort, and then funding the foreman position, and that's really all that's going on. You're muted.
Sorry, that was a swipe of my hand.
Easy to do.
That sums it up. I mean, it looks even more confusing because there's just a person that moved in the form, but it's not a change.
Okay, okay,
The budget is not adding a position. Those 8 positions were funded in FY24. It just haven't been filled.
oh, okay, they were all fun, okay,
They were all funded FY24.
yeah, okay,
And we just haven't got there yet for
Okay.
some reason.
okay,
But
yeah,
but yes, the labor's contract does include steps. Depending on the pay grade, there's a handful of steps
Yeah.
that, depending on years of service, they may be obligated to get.
yeah, okay. Okay. Sean, one thing I noticed on the expenses, as you said, there are a lot of moving parts, and so it's a little bit hard to it was a little hard to track everything, but overall expenses, rising a little over 3%. So in total, there are some things that are growing. Anything you could say about that to help us understand, so it's running over advisory guidance. I'm guessing there are good reasons for that, but could you, any light you could shed on sort of thinking about that?
Yeah, I mean, the 2 biggest items in those expenses were line painting and guardrail replacement. Those make the lion's share of the actual increase. They do jump out on the sheet as well. Line painting, there's 2 things. One, we've continually increased our efforts on the line painting, mostly because there was numerous roads we weren't doing either fog lines every year or other things, and for safety reasons we've decided to do that. There's also been price increases. There was a spike during COVID, and it didn't come down that much. That's contracted. That went out to bid, and then there was some bidding issues. This year we're actually going to be over because we had some issues with the way it was bid. It'll get rebid over the winter, and we're essentially going to get back to a spring schedule for painting, which we haven't had for quite a while. And then we'll carry that forward. The guardrails, there's multiple things going on with the guardrails. That the vast majority of them are rotting out. Anyone that, if you drive down any of the main stretches or any of the hilly stretches, you see them. They're starting to get holy and broken. 2 things happen. One, they get attacked by the salt and the chlorides that we spray on the road every, snowstorm or ice storm. So they age prematurely. And then there's a lot of car strikes. Now, when it's a legitimate accident and there's damage to the guardrail, we get recovery from the insurance company. But there's an awful lot of them where we don't. There's no reported accident. Someone hit the guardrail, it rolls it back, and it comes at it's not cheap. And when they're starting to deteriorate, it does more damage than if they were brand new. So that cost has crept up quite a bit. So we're a little behind on replacing them, which is causing a lot more maintenance. So I'm trying to cover some of it in the budget. To be able to start replacing pieces that get hit and or damaged. And then on the capital side, there's certainly some significant hits that we need to make, because when we start doing entire sections, you're talking $30,000 or $40,000 to make you know, one long, like 1,300-foot section on South Main Street.
Any other pieces where sort of, after you adjust for all the shifting from one category to another, any other areas where things are going up?
No, nothing really major. The maintenance we left where it is. That may or may not cover. We're having a difficult year. This year I can speak for that. We're gonna be well over, I think, this year with the amount of issues we're having with the big trucks. And that's just, we have an aging fleet. We chose to not replace some of the big trucks. We tapped the brakes before COVID, and then I didn't even dare try to replace any of the big trucks during COVID. So we're at the tail end of that. We have a couple snow fighters that are over 20 years old, so they're taking a lot of maintenance. And everything we own is out of warranty. So every time they break down, they're getting towed out and coming back with a pretty hefty bill. But I did not adjust for that for next year. I see a couple questions.
Yeah, let's go to Paul.
Right, going back for a second on row 6, the foreman position, I think it's kind of a bug in the spreadsheet. Because if I understood Jeremy, the fiscal year 24 budget had the same amount, so it seems like that cell, currently it looks like there was no budget for that in 24, and there's a $70,900 in 25. But if I understood Jeremy correctly, that 70,900 was also in the 24 budget, right? Seems like that cell's incorrect. It should not be 0.
Yeah, the head count remains the same. It's sort of where the positions were rolling up to, those sub budgets.
Because as it looks now, it looks like there was no budget last year, and this year there's an
Yeah.
an addition of 70,900, which isn't what I heard you and Sean say.
Well, I saw the same thing, and that was precisely why I asked the questions I did. I think one thing that might give you comfort that as Jeremy said, it's really, and as Sean said, it's really a shifting around, is if you look at the total salaries line, just a few lines down, the increase is much less than 70,000. So the increase is mostly the COLAs, that sort of thing.
Okay.
If it had really been unfunded and there was a $70,000 ad, the increase would have been much bigger. I mean, I started down exactly the same road, but heard the story and then saw the bottom line and thought, oh yeah, that works.
So that number is actually in a different line item for fiscal year 24 then, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to see. Okay.
Yeah.
Funded in a different position.
Okay.
Nora?
Thank you. I am, just for the record, could you just expound more on the tree removal piece and the difference between Eversource and what we're doing for tree removal? Because I hear a lot of pieces about that. Oops,
Well,
lost you.
has nothing to do with this budget, other than the fact that we've estimated that in the past 7 or 8 years since we had the beginning of the massive die-off of oaks, while we've spent 300,000 to 400,000 on big takedowns, Eversource spent way in excess of $1 million. It's hard to pinpoint exactly what they spent, because tree for tree, they obviously get a better deal than we do from their vendors. But they've outpaced us probably 3 to 1.
But is this part of that project? Is this part of it, that it's only 50,000, or where's the?
Oh no!
Right.
We've been spending over 100,000 a year outside of this 50.
So where is that in the budget? Where is that in the budget generally?
It's in the budget. It's not covered really anywhere. Last year we used some ARPA money,
Mhm.
and we had leftover annual town meeting money from the prior year. The year before that, we had used stabilization money. And I think the year before that, we had annual town meeting article money.
Okay, thank you.
So this does not fund all the tree work that has to be done. In fact, this year, right now, after using up all the funds that we had available to us, we're already, as of today, 18,000 over. And we're not at a point where we can just tap the brakes and stop, because when we have storms, right now, there's several trees that have to come down and several that have to get picked up that are beyond our capacity. So it
Thank you.
doesn't seem to be letting up.
Okay,
There's
thank
probably, there's probably another 150,000 that needs to come down in the next calendar year that isn't funded. It's not funded by this budget.
you. Okay, and then, Sean, about down, a little bit, line 37, sidewalk materials, what exactly is that? What does that cover? I mean, I know it's sidewalk materials, road and sidewalk, but do you have more sidewalks going in, or the 50,000?
Road and sidewalk materials.
Is that curbing, or is that,
It's road and sidewalk. That's all materials that we buy. That's not to build roads and sidewalks. That's to repair.
okay. Thank you.
We put 4 ton of material down today, just patching potholes. We'll do it again tomorrow. And then any work we do to repair sidewalks, most anything else we do to, increase sidewalks, add sidewalks would be under some other project.
Okay,
Wh-
thank you very
where-
much.
Where are you year to date on spending on that? I'm just noticing the 24 and 25 are a decent bit above the 3-year average, so I'm guessing it had been underfunded last year, or had to bump it up to kind of cover what you needed to do.
I'd have to flip screens actually, I shut that down when I
Okay,
loaded mine. I don't have a year to date, but it'll be spent.
okay,
I have the year to date. So far, we spent 19,000 on road and sidewalk materials.
okay, thanks. Mike Flanagan, did you want to have a question?
Yeah, there's 2 questions from me. First, Sean, what's the consulting? Is it ADM Consulting? Is that just an ongoing contract relationship we have with?
Well, it's numerous consultants we use during the year, either to finalize plans, survey different areas. It's really anything that would be out of the scope of the strictly stormwater, or the major road projects carry their own consultants. But we need to lean on consultants either to do some surveying, or drafting of plans for a smaller project. We had to remember that the complete streets projects, all of them have to be self-funded. The design work has to be self-funded. So that was much more so before, but even recently, we still have some complete streets work we're doing. So that had to be drafted up. There's a sidewalk that's going to go in front of the Pilgrim Church. Somebody needed to draft that up and draw it. And while the complete streets, the state is funding the construction, they expect us to fund the design. So that's where that comes from.
Yeah. Thanks. And then if I heard you right, I wasn't keeping a tally. It sounded like there were a number of items this year that are above the budget coming in, whether it be snow or ice or some of these other items. Is the expectation that what we have here, the 24 budget of 1.3 million at the bottom line, will be over that when it's all said and done in 24?
Well, it's always over it because of snow and ice. But we do transfers to cover that, to bring it back in line. The intent with the couple items that I brought up were based on either the historical 3-year average.
Outside of snow and ice will be above? And I guess what I'm asking, I guess, is, let's put aside snow and ice for the second, is if 24 is above, is 25 going to be a down year from a spend, or is it also going to be similarly above, do you think, from what we see here?
25 is not going to be a down year, I don't expect. I expect to bring it in at this budget, outside of snow and ice.
And will 24 be at that budget outside of snow and ice, you think?
Expect it to be.
Yeah. Thanks.
What else? Other questions for Sean? Other parts of this budget to explore or talk about?
Sean, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good. Go
Okay,
ahead.
good. On the guardrails, I remember maybe from a long time ago that there were two types of guardrails that we look into, and we actually go for the more, I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, but the more natural looking, the more expensive, and the one that wears out quicker. Is that is that my memory serving me correctly?
It does. Two-thirds of that is still correct. It doesn't last as long. It tends to be more fitting, aesthetically pleasing with the rural character of Sherborn. It is not more expensive now. That flipped. At one point, well before COVID, the Core 10 or non-galvanized that we buy was more expensive actually than the galvanized for whatever reason. That had more to do with the steel mills, I think, than anything. That's flipped on its head. So it is slightly less expensive. But towns that bought galvanized guardrail when we bought Core 10 are not replacing their guardrail right now. We are, but we made that choice.
Okay. And the majority of the cost is well, I mean, maybe I should have actually stepped back and asked the question: is the majority of the cost police detail and in terms of time, or is it material?
No, it's very heavy, the material, very heavy. You're buying steel. And for the replacements, keep in mind, fortunately we're able to save a lot of the posts. So they're able to go out, unbolt the rotten rails off the posts and mount new rail. So we're saving a fair amount there. The posts, even when we're buying the Core 10, the non-galvanized, the part of the post that goes in the ground, they still galvanize,
Yeah,
or they would
makes
just
sense.
they'd have already rotted off and fallen over.
Yeah.
So of course there's time, labor, and police details built into that, but it a huge amount of materials, and that's a contracted price that gets bid out with our consortium every couple of years.
But the police detail, Sean, is a separate line item in your budget, right? So whether it's for guardrail work or tree work or whatnot, when we get an invoice from the police department, it goes to your police detail line.
Correct. And some of the contracts, they carry their own police details. I believe the guardrails are that way. But when we're doing tree work, it's baked in there that we will cover the police details, and they'll just handle the tree work. That's how we set that contract up. Certainly anytime the DPW is out and we need police details, that's the line item that covers it.
All right, Penn, go ahead.
So just a quick question on guardrails. Since Wasim mentioned the two types, I would expect that when you're replacing a section, part of something, you're going to go with like. Has there been thought given to, if you're replacing long enough sections, going with whatever is less expensive at the moment, rather than worrying about an aesthetic consistency across town?
No, the price isn't significant in that manner. There is a couple of areas that I deemed safety wise we needed to stay with the Galvy so that it kept its strength. So there's a few choice places in town that are already galvanized. One of which was pre-COVID or during COVID, I couldn't get the other material. The others were by choice. And then, there's a section across the street. There's one on Route 16 where one side is galvanized, the other side is so rotted it's going to fall down. When it gets replaced, it'll be galvanized to match the other side, and because of where it is, and the safety that we need.
Thanks.
And I will mention that at least a couple select board members have reminded me that there may have been either a vote or some very strong consensus that guardrail in town be core 10, the weathering steel that looks rusted. So there's definitely a strong support for the weathered, more natural look than the shiny silver guardrail. So sort of a policy thing through almost through the select board, if you will. The select board are also the roadway commissioners, since we don't have separate roadway commissioners.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Shelley, go ahead, please.
Sean, I just had a question, and maybe it's somewhere, but I don't see it. Are there state like grants or programs to help offset some of the costs for the maintenance of these things, like the roadways and guardrails and storm drains and things like that, that we could apply for?
Well, oh, there absolutely is. And we'll talk more about that during the capital.
Okay.
Because it does offset our chapter 90 allotment every year is basically an automatic.
Okay.
It's 260 and change per
Okay.
year. This year, the state's also supplementing with another 50% of that, which they also did a couple years ago. They'd like to name it different things if they're able to do it.
Okay.
And then there's huge grants. We got several different grants that we combined for the roundabout. That paid for the lion's share of that. Complete Streets grants continue to pay for different items. They paid for the sidewalks downtown, the rail trail, some more sidewalks this coming year, and the sidewalk in front of the library was also paid for by the Complete Streets. So yeah, you definitely don't see it in this budget.
Okay.
This
I
budget,
figured, but I just wanted
This
to
is the
ask.
budget
So is this
outside of-
kind of represented like what's kind of the leftover costs after we've taken into account some of the programs and grants that we've?
They're kind of
Exactly.
two different things in that this budget is the operating budget. This is for like the maintenance aspect of the roadways,
Okay.
sweeping the roadways and filling potholes and line painting, whereas the grants would cover capital projects that we would generally hire a contractor to do.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
full rebuild of a roadway or construction of a sidewalk that's not there yet that is added. So there are grants available to do new work, but there's no grants available to
The
offset our operational costs.
Got it. Okay. Thank
And
you.
another way to look at that is we almost create nothing with this budget. We can basically just maintain it, and a few items we're not even maintaining. Tree work we're not maintaining. We're kind of trying to catch the emergencies with this budget and somewhere else. It used to. It used to cover that. Used to be all we had, but since the massive die off, that's been an annual ask somewhere along the lines. And guardrail's starting to pick up that.
So
But
this
we'll
is like status quo then?
Correct. Yeah.
Got it. That's okay. Helpful. Thank you.
All right, so unless anybody has anything else for Sean, let's keep
Actually,
going.
may I ask a few more questions if you don't mind, Dan?
Sure.
So, oh, and I have to turn off the camera. So the snow and ice, just forgive me if you had already mentioned this. Why are the salaries 2% budgeted? Why are they budgeted just 2% higher?
So honestly, currently, and we don't want to get too deep into this, but currently, all the union salaries are 2%. That's what they had the past 3 years for an increase because of their collective bargaining agreement.
Oh,
So
got it,
that
got it.
we initially put in there, and that's what this budget carries.
I see. Got it.
Jeremy
Makes sense.
mentioned We're out for negotiation, so that's all that's in this budget for any increases, overtime, anything is
Okay,
based on a 2%
But why
increase.
does it fluctuate? Like, for example, what is it? Earlier, the line was 45,000 at some point in the past. Why does it fluctuate? like this, as opposed to you always increase that budget line item by whatever, your expected or your bargaining agreement COLA? Why does it go down, I guess, is my question.
You mean no, in the snow and ice?
Yes, the snow and ice salaries, why does that line go down budget-wise?
Because, well, it doesn't. You're looking at actuals versus budget.
Oh, yes. Okay, sorry. All right.
Which again, you'll have the biggest discrepancies in snow and ice because it's a fictitious, but we don't budget anywhere close to what we're gonna have.
Right. Yes, makes sense. Okay, sorry for that. Let's see. I think, going back maybe to Paul's point, I know the foreman is a new line item, well, or maybe not new line item, but was not 70 last year. And I know that the total number is the same, but I kind of second Paul's point, right? It's, I mean, if we had the foreman position itself, and if there's any rationale to having that be a separate line item, it's a lot easier to have consistency from year to year as opposed to moving things around. I can see, you made the rationale for, okay, well, we have the land management skilled laborer. You just moved that into the category of general skilled laborer, and completely understood, right? But again, if there's rationale to moving things, that's fine, but consistency helps as well.
Yeah, that's,
Well,
thanks for the same. I was just gonna jump in. I think Deb's gonna probably want to say something similar, but I think part of this is just the effort to not have 5 different budgets and roll it up into one. And when you do that, there's a lot of, stuff in, stuff out. Deb, did you want to expand on that?
Yeah, I was going to expand on the snow and ice as well, but yeah, with the salaries, like can see, like in actuals in the foreman, there was no actual, in the FY1 22 and 23. So I think when we did the budget, there was talk of a foreman, but we weren't sure. So we just added the person in the skilled labor, but it's really just a reclassification. It's the same head count. So I wouldn't get too hung up on the titles as much as the head count. And then,
there's people on the other end of this conversation, so we need to be really careful. But there's a negative 100% somewhere that might offset almost the entire increase. So if you look for it hard enough, you'll find it. We can't just wipe these things out because they're in the collective bargaining agreement. They're in the grid, the step scale. So they did the proper thing by budgeting what I know is going to happen.
Yeah.
It's actually going to happen this fiscal year, but it's not going to be much of a shortfall.
Yeah. Deb, did you want to say something about snow and ice too?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware. Snow and ice is budgeted separately because it fluctuates so wildly from year to year. And it's like Massachusetts state law says that we can budget low and we can overrun our budgets without moving things around. Like all the other budgets, we can't overrun in total prior to 2 years or 2 months to the end of the year. But snow and ice, you can. So that's why you want to budget it low, just on the off chance it's going to be low. You wouldn't want to burden the taxpayers with budgeting, let's say $200,000 here when it's only going to be $100,000. So the law allows us to budget low. So that's why we just keep it flat every year. And then at the annual town meeting, we do a supplement and it moves free cash over there. So it's really to the benefit of the taxpayers not to budget any higher other than a small percentage in snow and ice.
Thanks, Deb. That's helpful. Penn, let you get in what maybe will be the last word here.
Okay, just a quick question. If the salaries went up contractually 2% on snow and ice, why is there the 3.35% jump on the on the department salaries? Are they not still covered through that contract, or is that new contract kick in for 25? Is that the anticipated increase with, so if I understood correctly now, then look at my notes, the new contract kicks in for 25. So is this reflecting what you expect on that?
No,
Okay,
No comment.
okay, sorry, I didn't mean to be out of line there.
All right, so last call on this, and then we should probably move on to the next item. Okay, Sean, thank you very much. Appreciate your taking us through all of this. It's very, very helpful. And I have to just apologize, and Kathy, give me just 1 second. I realized we were going to approve minutes, and I was so excited to talk about DPW that I just blew past the minutes. So if it's okay with everybody, let me suggest that we take a look at the minutes from last time, and then we'll come to Farm Pond in just a few minutes. Just so we get the minutes done rather than saving it to the very, very end of the evening. So
Dan,
yeah.
may I ask a quick well, maybe not so quick, but question to Sean, since we're still, I don't know if we're past that, but it's related to tree work. Is that okay?
Yeah, I'm just trying to keep us from getting too late tonight, but go ahead.
So the question is about, Sean, is it more economical for you to do the tree work in the cemetery and other places than for them to contract out?
We have a very good contract, and we manage it pretty well. The more we do, the better off we can react to different obstacles, like the contractor committing a crew and not being able to get police details, or intending to do certain trees in an area they just can't get because of the traffic. So
Yeah, in general, it's best to have, for the same services, to have one contract instead of two. There's an economy of scale, and you get a better price with more work. So we're working to align those contracts.
Oh,
with
you
the
are?
Cemetery
Okay.
Commission.
Awesome. Thank you.
Wasim, did that take care? Was that what you're after? Okay, great. Thanks. Good. Okay. So let me do a screen share. Let's jump to minutes. All right, so here they are, with thanks to Penn for putting these together. I will, in the usual form, scroll through. Please, anybody on advisory or anybody else, jump in with any corrections or suggested edits. Hoping everyone had a chance to take a look at these before the meeting. And for those careful readers, in the draft that I circulated, there was this question at one point about whether Penn had talked to Chief Ward or Chief Galvin. That got sorted out, and it was Chief Ward. So that's all correct in here, if you're wondering about that thing that was in the draft that I circulated. And here again is the comment from last time about snow and ice, and legal budgets are the two that can run over, just as Deb described. And there we are. Anybody with anything to correct or suggest that we change? If not, I'd welcome a motion to approve minutes as shown on the screen.
So moved.
Thanks.
Second.
Thanks. Okay, quick roll call. Penn,
Aye.
Shelley,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Wasim,
Aye.
Mike W,
Aye.
Natalie,
Aye.
Mike F,
Aye.
Nora,
Aye.
and I'm I as well. So minutes approved 9-0. Okay, thank you, everybody. Sorry to have gotten that out of order and lost track of where we were. So now now we'll continue on in the order on the agenda. So we'll come to Farm Pond, and I believe you're going to tell us both about the Farm Pond Fund and also about the one capital request. Which mostly we're going to talk about capital at later meetings, but since you're here, if you want to walk us through that, or you and Tom want to walk us through that, that'd be great. So the floor is yours. I'm happy to share the budget doc if that would be helpful.
Well, I'm wondering if we can let Catherine do the capital first, and she's not feeling the best, and I'd like her to be
Sure.
able to get out of here.
That's perfect.
Catherine Rocchio, Chair of the Farm Pond Advisory Committee, getting over a cold. So sorry, I was just telling Gina, I hope I don't have a coughing fit. 60 Harrington Ridge Road. So I can share my screen,
I
right?
think you should be able to.
Okay. You guys see this? This was our presentation we gave last week.
Yes.
Everybody see it?
Good.
Okay, great. So this was our presentation last week. We have requested, so in summary, before we go into this, we're requesting, and capital approved it, $32,000 to complete a project that was preliminarily funded by a earmark from the state, but to create a watershed-based plan. Just going quickly, this is what a watershed-based plan is. It's organized. It's an organizing document. It's required by the Mass DEP and the U.S. EPA, and the main goal of it is to provide a document. It's a requirement for us to get further grants to help with water quality. So it's something that Farm Pond Advisory Committee had on its to-do list for a long time. I'm going to go into that in the next slide, but everyone knows that's this Farm Pond. There's a reasonably sized watershed. This is situating it here. And again, it's required. This document, 9-part document, is required to apply for other grants. So giving you a quick history, great pond. It's a great pond, and it's also a lovely pond. We did have our first hints of things being amiss in 2020. We had a cyanobacteria bloom. We started to get worried. We've been having this to-do item of create a watershed-based plan on our agenda for like 4 years. We tried to do it ourselves. We looked at other towns. We struggled, and then we tried to get ARPA money, and we were so lucky, thanks to the select board, to get an earmark of 50 grand. Meanwhile, summer 2020, big drought, terrible. We were able to, fortunately, while things were terrible, we were telling everybody we're going to do a study on this and try to understand, not only we're going to get a watershed-based plan, but we're going to understand more about what's going on. So again, clarity just went down to a ridiculous amount. I can show you a little picture to remind you, this was the picture of that summer 2022. Okay, so we're stressing about the clarity going down. We've got the earmarked funding. We talked to a couple consultants about what should go in a watershed-based plan, and we interviewed them over the summer of 2022. We developed a detailed RFP, put out to bid, and we selected woman-owned, great consultant, Applied Watershed Sciences. Her bid was $82,000. She did a lot of work this year. If you're going to ask me how much of that we've spent, we have some money of that 50 left. We haven't quite spent it yet, but her budget and her contract was a total of 82,000. So that's the gap. So we're requesting our ask of the town is the balance of this $32,000, and what we get for it, well, we get a lot of things. I can send this around, but we get a lot of things. But the balance of the work is our 2024, because the testing, intense testing, equipment, constant testing for 6 or 7 months needs to happen over 2 seasons. So you kind of average them out. This past year was a reasonably good year. It was sort of rainy. Who knows what this summer will be? And then in 2020, so there's the testing. 2025, we complete this. Mass DEP has to sign off on it. And in parallel, we were trying to cover this with grant money. We did apply for a grant this fall. We didn't get it. And we went to the grant meeting last week. We're hoping this other grant, we have a good shot, I think, of getting this. So they're kind of going for a lot of equity communities, which we're not really necessarily one of those, or disadvantaged communities. But it also seemed like it's the type of this grant is like set up for RFP, watershed-based plans. So we would pay back the town if we were able to get it. But I don't now, and this might be wrong actually, we kind of heard a summer award, money becoming available in September, but I could be wrong about that. But when we presented to the capital budget last week, I did sort of point out this quote from our consultant quite recently, which was, we are in a really kind of an important sort of watershed moment that we need to complete this study, get a recommendation, have this document in hand, and then we can go forward and act as we need to in a way to preserve and protect and remediate the pond. So any questions? I'm sure you have a lot. So this is the capital request that was approved last week.
By the capital budget committee.
Yes, by the capital budget committee.
Right. So questions for Kath?
Should I keep sharing, or do you want to poke back to it? Or do you want me to stop sharing?
I think you can stop sharing.
Okay.
Anybody with questions?
I have a question. I'm just,
Yeah.
am I understanding that once we have this plan in place, that positions us to potentially apply for future grants for projects related to the farm, but we need this in order to do that, right?
Right, exactly. It's a blocking
Okay.
item. Yep.
So okay.
And that other grant I mentioned that we went to the meeting for last week is sort of, it's about $1 million, but across the state, but it's set up to help towns create these watershed-based plans.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
A lot of it. I should add, so document is a critical part of this as well. The document, the watershed-based plan. We will get that from the consultant, plus all these 2 years of data, plus a internal loading model of nutrients, external loading model, so what the watershed contributes, what's going on in the pond, and some recommendations for what we do, because the water quality is declining.
And I'm sorry, Nora, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to point out, thanks, Kath, and that the capital budget committee voted 3-0 in favor of that. So
Yeah, thanks, Nora. Yeah.
And then is that once we have this watershed plan, does that have to be, are there additional costs that will incur down the road to update that? Does it have an expiration or?
No, it does not.
Okay.
Hopefully that came up at the grant meeting last week, I feel like, or maybe at Capitol, I can't remember, but it should be, a living document.
Got it. Okay. Awesome.
Anybody else? Yeah, thanks. It's great work. And hope you get over your cold soon.
Oh, thank you. All right.
Jeannie, are you going to talk about the other piece?
Yes, the other piece is fairly simple. Farm Pond is a revolving fund, so we fund ourselves basically. It's funded by revenues that come in from sticker sales, boat permits. So the only time in recent that we had to ask the town for money was the year of COVID when the revenue was off substantially. So this year we have our returning waterfront director who was terrific, and she runs a really good ship with the staff, and I think we're good.
I can share the budget if anybody wants to see the numbers, but as Jeannie said, there's not, if everyone had a chance to look at it, there's not a lot going on there.
And there's no requested change to the revolving fund spending cap.
Right.
It's
Still
it's
at one-
remaining even.
Still at 160.
At 160, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think everybody's good. Nothing complicated here. Okay. Thanks, Jeannie.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's go on to conservation. Jeremy, are you gonna talk about that, or Michael?
Well, I can just to say a few things, but I see the two co-chairs are here, Michael and Courtney, so they can also add some more detail should they wish. And they actually, I think, may have been included in your packet, but there was a nice summary that they prepared on their budget, on the Conservation Commission budget. Did that summary make it to the advisory?
I have not seen that. I don't know if anyone else has.
Oh, no, it didn't, Jeremy. I omitted that.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
Well, essentially, it's summarized and Michael, Courtney, please add if I miss anything, but it sort of gave a little details of the background and the history of hiring the conservation agent. Finally, it took some time, and they have accommodated in the budget that hiring by some offsetting expenses and offsetting revenue. But essentially, this budget for the Conservation Commission provides for the funding of that position, an administrative assistant with some reduced hours going into FY25, and some modest expenses. So it's a fairly small budget. But fortunately, the big news is that we have a great conservation agent that's joined us at the start of this calendar year. And this budget accommodates her.
All right. Thanks, Jeremy. Michael, looks like you wanted to add to that.
No, given that you've got a lot to go through, I'll desist and just be around for questions.
Okay. So questions. It all seemed pretty straightforward. If whoever the keeper of that document is could forward it to me, I can pass along to advisory just so everybody has it and sees it.
Yeah, I apologize. It didn't make it out. It's well thought out. Thank you for putting that together, Michael and Courtney. We'll make sure it gets to advisory.
Great. Again, I think this is pretty straightforward, but the background and context will certainly be helpful. Anybody with questions, comments?
So the conservation agent, the budget is up because it's a new person, so it's a new hire?
Yes.
We haven't had a conservation agent in several years. The one that we had for several years left in 2020. And we had two hires who actually didn't really have very much experience, and we tried to train them. Both of them didn't last very long. And then we were using basically consulting services until we were recently able to make this hire. So it's been several years and several market adjustments to our ads.
Okay, thanks.
Nora, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm just trying to understand. So is it the same person that was the consultant before? And then the differential between, I'm just looking at 2023 versus 2024.
Yes, yes.
So if you can
same
just explain
person.
that a little bit. So
Sure.
that same person that was
It's-
doing it for 25,000 or 24.
Well, that person wasn't doing the full job, that there were very limited hours we could get from the consultant, and Michael and I have been carrying a lot of weight on our backs. So
Okay, I just
Now-
to kind
yeah.
of elaborate on that, just to explain it a little bit more, I think is good for the record.
Yep.
Like what work have you been doing versus what this new hire that I'm assuming just got hired or recently for 2024 then, correct?
Yes, as of January 8th.
Yeah, I mean, she was working at about 18 or so hours a week for the last year or so. And now, as you see in the form there, I guess you actually don't see that underlying form. She's
Okay,
been
no.
hired, she's been hired at 35 hours, which was what the position before when we were trying to hire was at 33. But we basically, and that we couldn't get anybody. And there's a shortage of agents in Massachusetts. It's a hard position in general to fill, and to especially have somebody as experienced as the one we have is a real win for us. She was courted by others, but she likes Sherborn. She loves working here, and so and we work to keep her happy. And so as part of so the salary is also a little bit higher than the sort of gradual increase with the COLA, because of part of negotiating what it would take to get her to work here at that level of hours. And part of it was boosting the hours a little and making the adjustment with the administrative assistant, lowering it there because she would cover some of that. We lowered 3 hours there, and it was sort of an extra 2 hours on the other, which is proportional to the rates. So we feel, so that's where the big change is from the previous years, is that she was operating at about half level, which mean a lot of stuff on land management did not get done. Some of the overseeing of different permits didn't get done, or we were doing some of that. So it's a pleasure now to be fully staffed.
Yep.
And then the 9% increase is what was negotiated, is that?
That 9% is a mixture of two things. It's both the number of hours and the rate.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Nora. What else? Anybody else on this budget? Okay, so again, I think the document that'll come around will provide a little more context and background, picking up on some of the points that Nora was touching on with her questions. Okay.
Oh, yeah, it's all summarized there. Yes.
Yeah, good.
And
Okay, that'll be
I'll
great.
email that out to you right now, Dan, so you have it.
Okay, perfect. And I will either later tonight or tomorrow send it around to everybody else. Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Courtney. Thanks, Jeremy. All right, so then let's continue on and let's go to sustainability. I'm gonna share that budget. Okay, and Courtney, Michael, Jeremy, who wants to walk us through this?
Sure. Let me give a summary of where we're at and what is encompassed in this budget.
Great.
The sustainability budget is it's its own budget line in the operating budget, mostly made up of salary. There were two part-time positions essentially that were funded from this budget. A grant coordinator, which was some time that was in addition to the town planning hours that Gino worked. Hold on one second, the dog just came in.
Speaking of dogs, you might have heard mine barking a little earlier this evening.
Are we gonna get to see the dogs?
They might put in an appearance. Maybe Jeremy's too.
She just wanted to the bed here. Come on out, Nellie. I want to say hi. So there were 13 hours that Gino had worked in the sustainability budget. And then also 18 hours that were for a sustainability coordinator, Dorothea. As you know, Gino not recently anymore, but this past year retired. And Dorothea has also resigned from her position here. So currently there's nobody in either of those roles, which gives us the opportunity to look at how we approach sustainability. And that's what we're in the midst of doing. So the Energy and Sustainability Committee is essentially an advisory committee to the Select Board. And that committee has been discussing and formulating a proposal to bring forward to the Select Board for the future of the sustainability program staffing. So what we're asking for is to level fund this budget. And I would note that the Form 5, you really just please neglect that. It doesn't really it's not showing what may or may not happen in this budget. In that we're exploring a number of opportunities, including sharing a sustainability coordinator with local communities like Holliston. I had a chat with their town administrator just today. But we need time to have that play out. So what we're doing, for the purpose of the budget, we're just asking for this to be level funded. Michael, any color what you want to add to that?
No, I think that about covers. I mean, it's right. It's hard to find with the total number of hours that was being paid for before would sum up in one person as to becoming a benefited position, which is obviously a significant cost burden and change. So the ideas of talking about with other towns to share a position would maybe be a way there, and there could be some economies in some of the programs that need to be done, because there's a lot of similarities of doing sort of some of the residential side of addressing climate change and getting people to do things, whether we can, it's always been a big issue of trying to do more regional projects since we're a small town. And so this might get some economies there where even having less hours than we have now, but sort of getting some synergies with doing it with another town might work out with this kind of budget. But and people are having some difficulties hiring for this position, and as everything in general, a good person is not inexpensive. But sharing it and maybe it'll being a benefited position that's shared, that this budget might be quite adequate for that, plus the fact that we also probably would need some expenses to do some programs in town. So, and besides that, it would also help with getting some work for green communities to help fund some of the town's energy efficiency projects.
Okay, thanks. Anybody want to start? So I can start on this one. So I completely get the logic of level funding. I think from my perspective, and of course advisory is just advisory, so this is just folks offering opinions. The idea of a kind of a sharing arrangement with another town seems like a potentially really good way to go, both in terms of the synergies and from advisory's perspective in terms of the budget implications. And I could imagine if that happened, it might be that if this budget were approved, that the ultimate cost might actually come in below this. And I think in terms of if this were to go the direction that's literally here of a full-time benefited position, I think I would have some concerns about that, or I guess would need some convincing adding in the benefit cost, and I guess would have some questions about what exactly is the scope of this person's responsibilities, what would they be doing, to fill a full-time position and so on. So I guess, if things went in that direction, I would have some concerns. The sharing with Holliston or another town, if there are opportunities to do that, seems like a potential way to get the cost to Sherborn down and still get some of the benefits of having some of this activity happening in town. Natalie, let me turn it over to you.
I was just going to say, I don't know that even if we approve this budget and the group doesn't really know what they're going to do, are we, like you just said, approving that they can hire somebody for 22 hours and benefit it? I mean, we can't stop that then if we approve this budget the way it is, right? We don't have any say over that.
Yeah, I think that's
Correct?
right.
Yeah, that's right, Jeremy? So if we approve this budget, then a 22-hour benefited position could come in next week because that's what the committee decided was the best thing.
It's not gonna, such a thing's not gonna come in next week. There is, before any position could be advertised, that's any change, there would need to be job descriptions put together, some discussion with the personnel board to approve those job descriptions, and so forth. And none of that has been done for either of these two roles, or a combined role. And also there needs to be some discussion at the select board level as well, as far as the future of the sustainability program.
There are a lot of steps. And other boards that'll be looking at this thing carefully before any decisions are really made.
Yeah, but not through us, through every other, or hopefully through a lot of other
The
boards.
select board and the personnel board.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, Natalie, you're right that, this is our chance to weigh in and offer a view on what this should look like. Penn, let's go to you.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, I can understand the simplicity and the logic of leaving this in here, but I share what I think is Natalie's concern. I'm a little worried about leaving the door open to making this a self-fulfilling prophecy. And as you both said, if we're here to oversee these things, it's sort of, we're letting this slide out of our oversight.
Paul.
Thanks. I wonder if you can say more about the $38,000 grant and whether that will also be a grant that we could budget for in 2025.
I over in column D, Paul.
Yeah, I think it's on row 24.
Yeah, so I think that's a grant that was received some years back for putting together the climate action plan. So
No, that was actually just to fund the first time.
Oh,
we had the
yes.
That was where we got an earmark from the state that we shared with Holliston, I believe, but
that's right.
Excuse me, that was back, and I think it's under FY21.
That's correct.
When that grant came in.
That's a one-time thing that we don't expect to continue then?
No.
Okay, thanks.
Mike F.
Can I just ask a high level question? What is the job description of a sustainability coordinator for the town of Sherborn?
It was broken down into two parts of, one is working with the town's facilities and its energy use, and monitoring it, as well as there's a specific Green Communities grant fund for helping finance energy efficiency projects in town, such as we're doing one in the town hall, we've done a little at the fire station, we've done them around over the years at the Pine Hill School. So there's working on the town's energy use for both cost savings and as well as to do some renewable energy work in terms of dealing with climate change, as well as then what was the original thing is that for climate change, about 85% of the town's carbon emissions come from the residential sector. And there's a state action path, legislation, where the state is supposed to reduce its carbon emissions by 50% by 2030, another 25% by 2040, and be net zero by 2050. As part of our actions to address climate change, where, what was it, 2 years ago, there was a climate crisis voted through at the at town meeting in recognition of the severity of this problem. And so there is, since mostly 85% comes from residents, there's the person is supposed to help promote programs and efforts so that residents can more comfortably and more aggressively reduce their emissions. It's the kind of idea of whether you get more energy audits through Mass Save, whether you take advantage of a lot of state benefits to, because you need that in order to get a lot of state incentives to convert to electrifying your household air conditioning and heating so that you can then be supplied by renewable energy and not fuel oil or natural gas. Also promoting what it takes to get people to feel more comfortable buying electric vehicles as well, since those are basically the major carbon emitters by our town. So it's sort of, how do we get our residents to do their share in cutting back on their carbon footprint?
And how would that person do that? I mean, I'm not asking, I'm just asking, I'm curious, is that person trying to get me to buy a Tesla? And I'm stuck on.
It's a matter of, I mean, programs, and we would try to do another program, I think, even for more solar. Like what we ran did we do it 5 years ago or so, 6 years? We ran a solar Sherborn, where I think we got about 40 or 50 households together to do it. And we got a sort of a discounted price doing it collectively with one contractor. So it's a matter of doing things collectively, and whether, and just educating, like, I don't know if you get the sustainability newsletter, which I hope everybody here gets or signed up for, but it's also a matter of educating people. There's been programs where we're bringing people, contractors, like a month ago. There was an open forum at the library where we had 3 or 4 contractors for heat pumps, somebody for one, I think just 2 for solar, and somebody for geothermal. And to try to get, and people talked, as well as residents, and another one presented what they've done in their homes. And so it's troublesome for people to figure out how to do it on their own, and how do you get people to collectively do it is the goal of this position, because it takes time to do those efforts. We did that solar by Sherborn as a group of volunteers, but we had somebody who had a lot of time on their hands to do that. And I've done a lot in the past, but I don't have the time to do that. So it's incumbent upon us to do our bit. And this position, a lot of towns have this position now, to do these kind of programs and try to do it even regionally.
And then, guys, any of those net zero targets, Michael, that the state has put forward, or any of those, are we as a town of Sherborn required to meet those? Or if we don't, are we not eligible for certain programs or grants or anything like that if we don't meet that 2030 target?
I don't think they've put that kind of bite in the legislation at this point. It was done 2 years ago, maybe, that it came through. But yeah, there's not that kind of stick. There's somewhat more of a carrot of that they have significant incentives, like for heat pumps. You can get $7,500. I mean, there's some very large incentives, but you have to also know how to get them, and go through a process of first doing your Mass Save energy audit. I mean, part of what the last coordinator did was try to set up a program with a particular contractor who does a good job for Mass Save. I mean, I was part of interviewing a group of them to figure out one that would have better quality, because people who get Mass Save audits sometimes complain about the quality and the consistency of the quality. So we went through a process of vetting them, and picked one informally that we'd sort of get stuff directed towards, because you have to do that before you can get a lot of the other incentives for heat pumps and other things. And it would be nice more aggressively to deal with somebody who could work with the building inspector to see who's doing, coming in for filing for renovations in their heating system or in replacing air conditioning. To sort of use that as sort of a list to go work from and try to get people to make sure they're considering the heat pump option, which is much more energy efficient. So there's efforts like that that could also be done with that department. But it seems to be in the end that you gotta somehow help people do things in some sort of collective way. It gets too hard to do it one-on-one, which we've done some of, where we have energy coaches. But that process is a little too, doesn't generate enough. That helps.
Thanks, Michael.
There are, to add to that, there is also a couple grants in a new program coming up that a sustainability coordinator would be involved when. One is called Green Communities. It's an annual grant that communities are eligible for. Sherborn is a green community, but you have to report annually on the town's municipal energy use of the town's municipal buildings, and grant funding is available for us to make those buildings more energy efficient. But there's a fair amount of legwork that is involved in those grants and the implementation of those energy efficiency projects. The sustainability coordinator would be heavily involved in that. That was a task that Gino did a lot of for the community. I think upwards of around $200,000 per year in grants are available to every town for those projects, but you need to complete the projects before you can get new funding. So it's a matter of making sure we get our projects done to be eligible for the new funding, and that requires the resources to do it. So that's a recurring grant from the Commonwealth. And then also just recently, the town got approval for its energy aggregation, for electrical energy aggregation townwide. We got the approval of our program from the Department of Public Utilities. And over the next couple weeks or months, I should say, that program will go out. We need to do some public procurement of energy services, and then all of you folks hopefully will be able to benefit from some greener and likely a little less expensive energy. But that also requires some staff to help with that program. So those are two sort of directly related to municipal benefit that the sustainability coordinator could help with.
Jeremy, can I just ask one follow-up? Is the expectation that this person will likely have recommendations that will cost the town more dollars in the short term with the hope of saving money longer term on more efficiency and things? But this person will be a full-time salary person, and then will come with recommendations to spend money on consultants or other projects to do certain things. Like, is the budgets of these other departments going to go up in the near term because of the recommendations made out of this department? Or
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either. That's not how it's worked in the past.
Okay. Thank you.
And the aggregation project, which I don't know how many people know it, but is where basically the whole town goes out to bid as a whole for electrical service, the generation part of your bill. And so hopefully doing it as a collective bid, we might get a better price than the Eversource basic service, as well as have an option to get lower cost renewable energy as part of, and that's part of the whole plan of how we can meet our targets of reducing our carbon footprint, is that we increase the amount of renewable energy and the electricity that we buy as a group. People can opt out of the program, so that's not an issue. And that program itself looks like it'll, we can also get a little bit of funding that'll come in that could help either go to, I don't know if it'll go to general fund, but there's a small amount of money in that program that would be a small cost share in a sense for this.
I'll just chime in from the description that you gave, Michael, following up on Mike Flanagan's questions. It's not obvious to me that this would amount to a full-time position. I think
We're
that's
not saying it's a full-time position for us.
That's I think why there's some tension here. I don't think people are convinced that this is a full, that this warrants full-time benefited position. And so as Natalie highlighted, this budget basically says, yeah, go ahead. And even though, it may go in a different direction, one possible direction is that someone's hired in a full-time benefited position. And I guess to me, at least, it's not obvious yet that that's the right thing for the town, which is why I find, more attractive. Okay, there's some things that could be very valuable to do, but splitting time with another town, and splitting costs with another town, to me seems, very appealing as compared to the direction that, again, maybe it's not the intention, but that at least, as Natalie said, would be permitted by this budget of hiring a full-time benefited person.
I guess that wasn't the goal of this, but we were just trying to have a placeholder so that we can do our negotiations and work out something with another town without something there. It's a little hard to negotiate and work out something with another town and do a joint hire. So I'm not quite sure what protections you need to that, because we're not arguing that it's a full-time position for Sherborn. Has never been the argument. But right, whether it could be and it's not our goal to have a 22-hour, at least speaking for myself, a 22-hour benefited position isn't very cost effective for the town either.
Right.
So I don't think, I don't know what protections you need or how we could structure this so that that there's some bounds other than the fact that the personnel board and the select board would have to agree to whatever is decided, and whether you have some confidence that they will do their appropriate due diligence to make sure that this money is spent appropriately. So that's maybe the best way I can think of since they're do it, especially having the select board as an elected group to have to approve it in the end, would be an important check.
Okay, thanks. Natalie.
Well, you said that there might not be a 23-hour benefited position here. Yeah, in the budget, there's a full-time position here.
No,
So you're asking for enough money for a full-time person, but you said that you are intending on, you're not even intending on hiring a 23-hour benefited person, right?
This is not a full-time budget. This was a budget for 30 hours, roughly 30 hours of work that we had in the past. That was split between two people. That's what this budget is. This budget numbers in the past that have been approved were based on about 30 hours of work between two people.
And now that they, what you said is 85% of the difference has to be made up of residents cutting their admission, so that you said it was at 85% that the residents have to do. And so this person is writing newsletters and putting on seminars. That's what they have to do. That's about it that they could do for residents, right?
I think you misheard me when I talked about the fact that they have to run programs, as well as working on the town municipal stuff and maybe setting up with contractors as some sort of group project. I mean, some sort of group contracting effort that might make it easier for people. And I would argue that if somebody does the job well and gets things done, I would say that the dollar savings that residents might have, and more importantly, if you valued, depending on your view of how you address the climate action issue, that it's a crisis and that there's a significant cost avoided by reducing carbon emissions in our town. And the value of that reduction of carbon emissions could easily pay for this job multiple times. But it depends on people's views of what the future cost is that we have even now of climate change. And that when you do these valuations of, let's say it's worth this $100 a ton, is because those are future costs. And their estimates are over $200 a ton. Those are the estimates that a lot of people have done of the future cost of us continue to emitting carbon dioxide. And so this position would hopefully, in the climate change area, pay for itself over in terms of if they get people to shift over and lessen their carbon footprint. But it's hard to do. But we need to do this. It's not a task that has gone well in the United States. And I'll get off my podium, but it's something that we need to try to do better.
I don't think anyone's disagreeing with that. I think, Michael, I think the issue is, what is this person going to do? What is it going to contribute to that effort, and how much time will it take? And, what resources should the town devote to that? And part of the challenge, of course, tonight is without a specific proposal on the table, because of course, that things just haven't developed to that stage yet. It's difficult, I think, for me, and I think for other members of advisory to, you can express a view and concerns about, boy, the full-time benefited position seems like a bad idea, but there isn't a concrete thing on the table that we can either look at and say yes or no. And so that's, I think, why there's the concern about, to what degree is this cutting open or breaking open, an opportunity for something that would go beyond what it seems like a fair number of people on the committee, would recommend. So Nora, let me jump to you.
Yeah, hi, Michael. Just really quickly, just for some institutional historical clarity. So in 2021, there was no position available, and then apparently a grant was given for $38,000, correct, to fund the positions. So then looks, so we had, then you said that Gino had half of that. Was he the sustainability coordinator with the, and I hate to use names, but he then.
We were both
increased his
sustainability
hours?
coordinators. He had the two roles, yes.
And then the grant coordinator was the person who just resigned for 27, and then fiscal year 29, that increased. Excuse me, I'm saying 29, I'm looking at 23, excuse me. I'm ahead of myself. So would the new person who's a new town planner be able to do this? Because that was done with, when Gino was working as a town planner. I'm just trying to understand the hours.
Yeah, I mean, actually, the titles there of grant coordinator is really not correct. Both, the two levels were both considered sustainability coordinators. But yes, Gino did it, but he got extra hours on top of which are more hours than the current town planner has.
Okay, thank you for
That's-
clarity.
That part of this budget was the fact that he got increased hours.
And so then my next piece of this is, we never got another grant after the 38,000. So I guess the grant coordinator, and I think this came up last year. So are they in charge of getting more grants, or is that, I'm just trying to understand that. So there were never.
That a portion of the duty or job would be to pursue grants, and actually the prior coordinator Dorothea did get grants, but not grants to offset her salary, but grants to
Okay.
do other sustainability activities.
Okay, so the 38 was initially for the salaries, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
There's no current grants out there to fund a sustainability coordinator's salaries. And I think that grant was actually an earmark, so that was sort
Yes,
of a
it was an earmark.
one-time.
okay, I just.
Somehow
just
they got at the state level, there was an
Okay,
earmark.
I just want clarity since it's, thank you. I
Sure.
appreciate it.
Ken, you had your hand up before. Did you want to offer a comment or a question?
No, I'm still mulling it over. Thanks, Dan.
Okay. So, Wasim, go ahead. I was going to try to summarize, but Wasim,
Does it make sense to just leave 2 in the fiscal year 25 budget request to kind of split that 72 into the same existing 2 lines?
so that they're both part-time positions?
Exactly. And also, I mean, quite honestly, again, back in 21, when this was the grant coordinator role was voted on by the town, again, the argument at the time was that, okay, well, we'll be able to generate enough grants to pay for that, right? So I kind of think of that as, well, we need to keep that, right? Because that's how this line item got created in the first place. And yes, absolutely. 2 years ago, the town voted for the climate emergency, and so the funding for that is agreed to by the town, right? So we need to have that activity happen as well, but maybe we can continue to allocate the same percentages between the two line items.
So that would be one way to, ensure that this didn't turn into a full-time benefited position.
I don't know what Jeremy would
And
say.
if I may also just quick follow up, there's a lot of activities that are absolutely worth it, like collectively, like the example you mentioned, Michael, like having 50 houses do solar together. I mean, that's a great activity. I would love to see that happen again. And so, but that activity, someone doesn't necessarily need to be, I don't know if that's a Sherborn specific activity, or you can have a community, regional, let's say. I don't know how it works, but then there are probably some things perhaps looking for grants. Well, that's probably more Sherborn, right? You want to look for grants for Sherborn, maybe. So there's, I guess what I'm trying to say is potentially there are elements of these two roles or one role or whatever it is that is more Sherborn specific, and another one that can be more cross community.
I guess I'd still say that is that viewing this as grant versus coordinator is not the way to do it. I have no problem. I would think I did notice when this thing was done that they called one a grant coordinator, because that wasn't the way the split was, in terms of both each of them doing that. I mean, I could see that you could change the name to two different sustainability coordinators, and if you want to split the budget up because you feel more protected. I don't know what Jeremy would say. I would say, in some sense, if that gives you some more protection, because in the end, if it works out that we do some other kind of joint thing, we're going to have to come back to everybody anyway to do that. So at this point, I'd say that relabeling the thing there, and if you wanted to split it up, that gives you some protection. I would say that's a way to move forward, and because we're going to have to go through a lot of reviews before we actually expend this money.
Jeremy, would that work?
I mean, I think that's fine. I'm not sure how binding that is per se, because what you'll see at town meeting is one budget line, a bottom line budget that includes, but not only the two salaries together, but also the meager expenses. So that's what town meeting votes for the budget for sustainability. It's a bottom line number, just like you vote for the schools is a bottom line number. What goes into that and how it's expended is there's flexibility in that expenditure, which is good. And you're letting your professionals do the roles of fulfilling the responsibilities of those departments.
Yes, I mean, yeah, of course, what's going to get voted is a single line item. I think and again, right, advisory is just advisory, it's others who actually, town meeting that will approve a budget, and the select board and the personnel board that will work out a job description and work out the details of what, the contract for that position is like. I think this is more a matter of how to best express advisories that reflect it, the conversation here, and the desire, I think, thinking, which it sounds like pretty much there's more or less, Michael Lesser, I think, agreement from you too, that, this isn't necessarily intended to be, this isn't intended to be a full-time position. So just, trying to reflect that. And it seems like Wasim's suggestion would be one way to do that. And I'm would welcome views from others on advisory, but that seems like one way to kind of express advisory's view that this isn't meant to be a full-time benefited position, and some other arrangement would be preferable, and convey that view, understanding that advisory is just advisory. It's a matter of expressing views of people here, presumably reflective of views that exist throughout the community. Advisory thoughts on that seem like a reasonable way to go. Natalie?
Yeah, if that's what you decide to do. I mean, Oh,
I mean,
I feel like we should just keep one line item. Like, I mean, we have the pressure on us as advisory to help. I mean, yes, the recommendation was level funding, but we're also looking for where we can make cuts. And I'm not comfortable with the exposure, just keeping the line item at whether it's ends up being a full-time position or not. I mean, have we done any studies looking at what what this type of a role in another town actually pays to have a sense of what we would need in terms of going to the table to negotiate with another town? I mean, do we think it's like half that cost, or do we think we would be up to 72, in which case we would just, does it make sense to share it? I don't know. I feel like if we have an opportunity to cut here, we should try to reduce that to be more reflective of what we think the exposure would be. Maybe whatever the high end of that exposure would be based on having done some research. Has there been any research done on what we think the potential exposure would be if it was a shared cost?
I'll flip this over to Jeremy and Michael Lesser in a second. I mean, I think as you said, it comes down to a judgment of how much should a person, how much can a person usefully do in this position? And it sounds like you're suggesting maybe that amount is less than $72,000 worth. And so that number actually should just be, whether it's split into two or one line, should just be, advisory's recommendation should be that it's less. But
well, if the goal is for it to be a shared cost, I guess I'm wondering, does it make sense to hold that amount for a shared cost? I mean, do we think our shared exposure with another town for this role is going to be $72,000 approximately? Or do we think
Jeremy.
it's going to be half of that? I mean, do we know what, I mean, I just did a quick search while we were on here just to see what other towns are paying for these positions, and
What'd you
it's,
find?
I mean, somewhat like the town of Natick was a little higher, and it was a benefited position, but it was in the range of 65 to 75 for a full-time benefited position. So I'm just wondering, like, if we are sharing this cost with another town and it is part-time, do we need to hold the full-time, like what it would be if it was potentially a full-time role? Can we give them something to be able to bargain with for paying for a part-time role that's shared with the town without having this line item of full-time, I guess, to Natalie's point?
Yeah, no, that's a good.
I mean, I know it's level funding. I get it. It's level to last year, but at the same time, it's just, we are under a lot of pressure, and I think everybody understands that. So I'm also hesitant to just approve it at just holding a placeholder.
A little context for that, the Natick position that you saw. So that's a new position. That's actually their second. That's an additional sustainability coordinator for.
Yeah, it's on a
town.
team. Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, so
It's to join a
that
team.
position would actually report to their sustainability director, who actually makes a higher salary than that.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily apples to apples per se for the position that we may need. But I mean, I think we're comfortable a shared position would be within this budget amount. How far less is still we don't exactly know. So we're just asking for the benefit of the flexibility to keep the budget level funded, so that we can have the resources to make this happen. I can say, in the interim, I've been doing some of the duties of helping with the Green Communities Grant to move some of those projects forward. And it's not, I hate to say this, it's not a sustainable model to have your town administrator do that. So we do need somebody in that role helping, so that I am not distracted by that as much as I am currently.
Nora, you had your hand up.
I withdrew it. Thank you.
Okay. Sean.
I just want to second that last comment by Jeremy. Jeremy's not just doing it by himself right now. He's spending a phenomenal amount of time doing it. Addie Mae and myself are helping him. It's a lot of work. So it's definitely not a sustainable model for the town administrator to be doing it. I just wanted to second that.
Jeremy, for someone who's doing this, I don't know if you've done any benchmarking, typical salary for somebody doing this in a full-time job and what might be an apples to apples comparison if Natick isn't? Guesstimate of what the salary would be?
Yep. Ashland has a position that somebody's currently in, and the salary portion of that is around 70 to 80,000. But then when you add in benefits to that, obviously it goes up. So that's where we would like that flexibility.
But Ashland is so much larger.
Yeah, but if we shared it with Holliston, then we would actually have a larger population base than Ashland with Holliston. But it,
The previous,
if we were to throw out a number right now, we would be guessing, and I'm just not in a position to do that, and I don't want to cut it short such that we lose the benefit of a full year of having somebody in this role.
Jeremy, did the previous sustainability coordinator do all this work that you're doing now?
One of them did, yes, Gina.
Okay. So is this on a job description, a list of all these tasks?
Yes.
There's been a lot
There
of
is a
talk
job
that somebody
description.
should make tasks, but I've never seen one.
There's a job description that's approved for the sustainability coordinator by the personnel board.
Which it sounds like is likely to be revised as there's kind of a refresh of what the position should be.
No, it actually still has,
Wow.
a lot of it would stay the same. A lot of the same tasks of doing work with municipal energy use as well as residential energy use and fundraising and keeping track of metrics so that there could be more performance-based kind of understanding of how we're doing as a town.
Right.
And such. So for the most part, a lot of the activities are there. It's just a matter of a view of what a job description looks like.
Yep. Yep. Wasim?
So for whatever it's worth, I probably would not be in favor of reducing the budget request from last year. I mean, if we're, again, this is something that the town has voted on a couple of times, 5 years ago, 2 years ago, right? So the tasks are there. If the job description by, let's say 2 people or part of it shifts outside of the town, again, I appreciate the fact that Jeremy, Michael, team are looking into the options of regionalization, right? So that's definitely appreciated. And again, these are activities that were voted on by the town. So I do think that we should keep it level funded and give them the flexibility. That's kind of where I stand on it.
Can I ask you a question? As someone what did the town vote on a couple years ago to do what exactly?
So the town voted a couple years ago to acknowledge a climate emergency and have the town and ask the town to develop a climate action plan, which it did. And then about 5 years ago, and Jeremy or Michael, you can help fill in a little bit here perhaps. I think about 5 years or so ago, the town voted to create the position of a sustainability coordinator, which I believe was, established as a part-time position in a vote from town meeting roughly 5 years ago. Jeremy, do you want to fill in any details on that? You may remember better than I do.
Well, it's from what I've read from the town meeting report, not by actually being here.
Yes,
but
yes,
I
fair
think
enough.
you covered it fairly well. In that, there was a vote at town meeting. It was a warrant article at town meeting. I think sponsored by some students from the middle school and high school, that essentially requested or directed, asked the select board to hire a part-time, I think it said regular part-time, which implies benefits, but a regular part-time sustainability coordinator.
You're mixing up the two a little bit. The student one was 2 years ago on the climate emergency. vote there, and about 5 years ago was the vote for a sustainability coordinator, that it was a citizen's petition by a group. There's the Upper Charles Climate Action Group, which has some Sherborn people there. They started that there. And that's when the position was first created and paralleled. Not quite sure how they ended up coordinating with this earmark grant, but somehow it did.
Yeah. So it sounds like there are a few different kind of ideas on the table. One is to just leave things as they are. Another would be to recommend splitting this into two parts to suggest, hey, this isn't meant to be a full-time benefited position. And another, I think, would be the one that Shelley suggested, reducing this by, say, 10K or something, in the expectation that a shared position would end up, our portion, Sherborn's portion of a shared position would end up coming in. I made up the 10K, but would come in somewhat below the 72. So reduce the number. And those seem like the different ideas that have been presented. Anybody want to offer, who hasn't spoken up on that, offer a view or a preference? And one other thing that we can do, depending on how quickly the select board and the personnel board move forward, is when we write the advisory report, we can certainly write our views into that report, our collective views on not a full-time position, hopefully a shared position, and so on. And that's another way that as a committee we can express our preference. But on those different options, Penn.
I would opt for splitting it, just because I think we've already taken a position trying to avoid benefited positions. And if we split it, then at least it lives there as a total sum, but it sort of expresses our idea, our preference of not creating new benefited positions. Because as a lump sum, it kind of opens the door to that.
Yep. Okay. And again, as Jeremy highlighted, town meeting will vote on a total number, but as you said, Penn, it is a quantitative way of expressing advisory's perspective on, hey, don't want to create a benefited position here. And it's a way of doing that and putting that on, kind of memorializing that. Mike W.
So I'm very tempted to agree with Shelley's suggestion of cutting the dollars. My only hesitation is kind of what Jeremy was kind of suggesting, is like, we don't really exactly know what we would be cutting it by. And so since we don't really have a dollar number to cut it, then I'm kind of defaulting back to agreeing with Penn and Wasim and others that splitting it to echo the 24 budget makes the most sense.
Others, Mike Flanagan, Mike F.
Can I ask one other question, just to maybe Jeremy? Jeremy, would this person report to you? And to the extent that this isn't a full-time position, and we, what would the other person be able to do? Who would direct that other person to do other tasks in the town that we talked about last week about the Council on Aging? There's a lot of projects they can do, but looks like a lot of projects in town that go unattended. So is there other projects this person can do, and who would direct that person? Who would that person report to do those things?
The position does report to the town administrator, and the daily activities are assigned by the town administrator. The position has and would continue to help the duties or the vision and policy of the Energy and Sustainability Committee and the Select Board, but the daily reporting of the position of the Sustainability Coordinator goes through the town administrator. Yeah, there's a number of projects throughout town that could use assistance and champions to help move along. As currently structured, the Sustainability Coordinator doesn't the job description doesn't have that, that component per se to do, you know, a roadway project or something.
Okay. That's something worth adding?
I think it could be, and, you know, again, we haven't brought forward any sort of revision of a job description to the personnel board. It could have, it potentially have duties to help the recycling committee and the transfer station. There's annual reporting that we need to do to Mass DEP for the transfer station and the landfill that you know, a sustainability coordinator could help with. There's actually grant funding that we get through the recycling dividends program that could actually offset some of the salary or time to that. You know, currently those duties are done by a volunteer group, the recycling committee. And I hate to say it again, pardon for the pun again, but that's not sustainable either. But there's certainly projects that could be done, but more from a, you know, project manager perspective than the sustainability coordinator perspective.
Okay, thanks.
I'll add that, were you gonna say something, Michael?
No, thank you.
Go ahead, Michael Lesser.
That to the extent that we pursue this, the thing of regionalizing it with another town and possibly getting, in the end, maybe 20 hours of splitting the position, there's more than enough for them for basically what we had in the past was close to 30, was over 30 hours. And now we're looking to 20 hours, which some of it would be, but some of that stuff would be some regionalization with the other town on some of the residential efforts, so that there'd be some economies of scale there. But with the 20-hour budget, if that's what it turns out like, there's more than enough for them to do on the sustainability between working with the town's municipal energy issues and grant issues. And sustainability also includes working with the recycling. And then working on residential side. So I think that with that possible vision of 20 hours is more than enough for them to do on the sustainability side.
Okay, thanks, Michael. So I think my suggestion would be really, I think, following on Penn's and kind of merging some of these things together, leave the number where it is for FY25, split it into the two parts as a way of signaling, hey, we're not looking for a full-time benefited position just for Sherborn. And I think given the conversation, I think Jeremy and Michael Lesser all would have heard kind of the views of advisory and kind of where people are. And, you know, I think a hope that the actual budget number would be picking up on Shelley's point, less than this, but understanding that, you know, it's the challenge of it's not worked out yet exactly how it's going to go and what a regionalization might look like. You know, with a hope and expectation that the ultimate cost of the town would be less than this, but leaving the number as it is for flexibility's sake, but splitting it into the two parts just as a way of signaling that that preference not to kind of green light the potential for a benefited position.
I'll add one little thing that there's no expenses in this budget there.
Right.
I wanted to move some of the money down there a little bit, but
yeah,
just to show that there will be some expenses there is another, if that also helps in the way you want to present this.
Yeah, I think that would be a sensible thing to do if there's a realistic estimate of expenses and doing a little shifting there as well. Does that sit okay with everybody?
Yes, sounds good.
Jeremy, is that a reasonable thing to do for the kind of to update this in that way?
Yeah, it sounds reasonable. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Anything else on this one that people want to talk about? Okay. All right. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you for the attention. We're around to talk if anybody wants questions.
Okay, I mean, you got a, you know, if you're in the spirit of, we've got another advisory, another potential advisory member popping up on Jeremy's screen. You know, in the spirit of advisory, providing feedback on budgets, this is a complicated one, of course, because, you know, there's still things that are in process, but I think, you know, there is a pretty clear expression of views about, you know, where at least this committee, you know, the direction that this committee would like things to go, understanding that the select board and personnel board.
I actually think there's no
play an
difference
important role.
between, I think that we're all on the same page, actually, in terms of trying to, right, we don't know what to do, but hopefully we could save some money. And we
yeah.
understand the skill, so I'm certainly not for finding ways to save some money on this. So I think we're in basically the same
Yes,
place.
so I think that's real, you know, without wanting to limit Jeremy's flexibility in negotiating something, I think that's clearly the direction that the committee would like things to go. Okay, so thanks. Let's keep going. And we're going to come to planning board budget. So Heidi, welcome. Thanks for being patient. Would you like me to share your budget?
That'd be great.
Okay, give me just 1 second here and I'll get that up. Okay, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I think as many as you know, Gino retired and he had been here for about 30 years. And he has some big shoes to fill on this. And this position was split where Gino had some sustainability hours and town planner hours. And this is just the town planner portion now. So salary has gone up a little bit for a variety of reasons, and the longevity pay has kicked in. So that went up totally about $3,600. And then the remainder on the expense side, Gino being seasoned with so many years, he didn't really need any training or education. And I'm putting in some money for education because I could really use the help and get up to date on some of the different programs that are out there. Mailing is one thing that is definitely going up, and we're seeing that price where we've had to do some more mailings right now for hearings, as well as we put in the legal notice line is about the same. Another area that we have is consulting. So we've spent, I think, about 6,000 to 7,000, maybe 7,000 right now so far in consulting, because we have 3 warrant articles that are on different zoning changes. One is the MBTA communities, which is a huge project that is coming up, and we have a consultant that we did get a grant for part of that, but also that we still will need a consultant for a little bit on that going forward. Our affordable housing bylaw, and we also have the solar overlay district that we are still working on. So I've upped that to be about $1,000 for next year, figuring we'll be winding down on some of it. I cannot get another grant right now for the MBTA community one. That was kind of a one-time one. So we're putting just a little bit more money there, and hopefully that's all we're going to be needing. So the total difference on expenses is about $1,600 difference from the prior year. But because the budget's so small, that looks like a big percentage number. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Heidi, could you just say for a minute more on the consulting? You said last year,
right? So
how much on and how much was covered by grant and so on?
So we did get a grant, and we have a $19,000 contract that is covered by a grant right now. And the town has also been using Gino as a consultant. He retired in June, but then was kept on as a consultant for this part year. So you don't see it in the actual budget spending right now, but we're actually below our allotted amount for this current year-to-date portion for the current budget year, because we didn't have his salary for the initial amounts. But I foresee that we're probably going to keep him on a little bit as consultant with all his years of service and the knowledge base that he has, he's able to help out Jeremy and some of the green communities items. But really, he spent 2 years working on the MBTA community, but the district that we're trying to create right now. And that's invaluable knowledge for the town. So that there will probably still be some consulting services for next year. So I upped it from the 300 to, I increased it $700.
Okay, thanks. So other questions for Heidi, comments?
Please forgive my ignorance here, but okay. I know I've been so many years on advisory, but still don't know some of the details. But the town planner, okay, it seems like a lot of activities now is does making Sherborn more sustainable part of that, and I guess you know, does sustainability fit under the bigger umbrella of town planning, or is it not? And if I'm asking question, I know it's 9 o'clock, so please feel free, Dan, to just shoot this question and stop the conversation. But I'm just trying to understand maybe a little bit of because you mentioned green community, you mentioned solar, you mentioned many things that seem to be somewhat aligned.
They used to be, and that's where Gino had 13 hours. Gino had been, I think, 35 hours, and of which 13 hours of those 35 had been carved out for sustainability, which is why he was familiar and worked on those communities, but and that then was under a different budget. And then he had 22 hours that were allocated to town planning. And the position that I'm in is just the town planning portion, the 22 hours that's on the zoning, building lots and dimensions of different things when people come in to have changes and approval on plans, special permits for events, and working on some of those different regulations as well. That's, I think and Jeremy might be able to handle it more. Some towns may have this as a broader position, but that's not what it is right now.
Also, the solar mention, I'll add that the solar mention that she made is about the zoning issue. It's not about doing solar. It's about.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. Yes. Yes,
It's
you're right.
about a bylaw about how people can do it.
Right. So it has to do with regulating large photovoltaic solar ground mounted systems. It's on the regulation side. Sorry, Wasim. Thank you, Michael.
I mean, you're raising an interesting point, Wasim, about, you know, what's the division of responsibilities between Heidi, the conservation agent, sustainability coordinator, and I think the hope would be that Jeremy's going to manage all of that in a, you know, effective, wise way to, you know, sort out, you know, how those responsibilities get split up and who's doing which pieces. Because you're right, Wasim, there's plenty of places where those things either touch each other or overlap. I mean, I agree with you. What else? Nora.
Hi there. So just if you can help clarify fiscal year 23 of 941 for the planning board clerk versus now 3461, and then the budget request then down 28%. So can you explain the anomaly there?
So if you look like 21, it was 1,700. So the planning board clerk is based on the number of hearings, and they take the meeting minutes for the hearings and as well as the meetings. And there are many years that you have more hearings based on what is going on in town. And like I said, right now we have 3 major zoning change articles in there. So that number is going to go up and down. We did decrease it a little bit from the FY24 because I looked over the average of the number of hours she had worked in the prior year. So it didn't seem like we'd need the 3,000 that we had from last year.
Heidi, that person, I'm sorry, Nora, I'm just sorry. Go ahead, Nora. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay. That person, the clerk, is basically paid an hourly rate. So the fluctuation is just how many hours does it take
Correct.
to do the minutes of the planning board and so on.
Right, you know, some meetings may only be an hour and a half, some meetings might be 3 hours.
And so you're at 22 hours, correct?
Correct.
So and again, not to harp on what we last talked about, but, and Gina was also at 22 hours plus, did you say 13 hours? I'm sorry.
I think it was 13, because I
It was
think.
it was 13.
Okay, and that was for sustainability coordinator, splitting that up. So it's 13 hours. I just want to, okay, thank you.
And to be fair to Gino, he probably put in a fair amount more than 35 hours per week.
Thanks.
What else? Just like my macroeconomics class this morning, trying hard to get people to engage and participate.
I'm trying to be a good student.
Oh, you're
Professor.
doing great, Nora. I appreciate it. Just kidding around. I'll be back at it bright and early tomorrow morning, meeting these folks again. So if you want to learn about the beginnings of economic growth models, I can tell you the room at Wellesley College to go to tomorrow morning. Anybody else with anything for being serious, getting back to being serious? Anything else for Heidi? Okay, thank you, Heidi.
Thank you.
So we will turn to Board of Health, and that's the last one for tonight. Give me a second. So Daryl, floor is yours. Would you like me to share your budget? Daryl, are you there? Daryl, you're unmuted. Michael Lesser, if you have any scope.
I'll go check.
If you can go sort out what's up, that would be great. Thank you.
And this is Ellen, and Daryl would like you to share the Board of Health budget.
Great. Okay. Ellen, are you gonna do this, or is Daryl gonna do this?
Daryl was going to. I don't know what's going on.
Okay, well, so Michael will check. Let's give that a minute to sort out.
May I ask a question while we're on here, not to go out, but Jeremy, are you going to be presenting to advisory the CPA that you did last week at Select Board? Okay.
I can, if
Yep,
if
we'll wait
just
till
so
now.
desire. We haven't chatted with Dan about that, but if that's
So
what you folks would like.
Thank you.
So Nora, two quick things on that. It's a great question. If it is in the warrant, then absolutely we would have a discussion, because we'll have discussion of every warrant article. If the decision, and Jeremy, you may know more about where this stands than I do. If the decision is it's not going to be in the warrant this year, then I think it's really our option. If we would like to learn more about it, we might be able to prevail upon Jeremy to do that. So I think that's kind of the decision point. If it's in the warrant, then absolutely. If it's not in the warrant, then I think we just have to decide, would it be helpful to do that? I take it from your question, you're thinking that warrant or not, it would be helpful to hear about it.
I think it would be, and I really apologize to go off track, but I just figured while we were waiting for Daryl, I would ask that question. So thank you. We can talk about that later. Thanks.
Okay, good.
Okay, really sorry about that. My computer died earlier this evening, and I switched over to my daughter's high school laptop, and everything was fine on the receiving end, but apparently I should have known when the camera wouldn't work that the microphone might not work either.
All right, so Daryl, I shared your budget, so I think everybody can see it.
Okay.
Floor is yours.
Well, I guess I'd rather hear questions because, again, I'm not sure what is of particular interest. I'd say that most things were somewhat level with and we eliminated a few items, but the most significant change is that we have an administrative assistant who we really need more hours for that person. And I have to say I was a little dismayed to hear about the policy of no more benefited positions, but it would mean her becoming benefited, or that position becoming benefited.
Okay, so I'm happy to start if to open things up. I guess, so as I looked over the budget, there were two areas of, I guess, one area of concern and then maybe another question. So the one you just highlighted, that is a concern because on the benefited position, on average benefits doesn't show up in this budget, but on average benefits are $14,000. Sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on, what a particular person's, situation is and what benefits they elect to take. And it's not that there's a firm policy against it, but given the tightness of the budget and the likely tightness of budgets going forward, I think there is a real reluctance amongst this committee, which I share, to expanding into benefited positions because that puts a significant additional expense to the town for all time once those positions become benefited. So I think it's a matter of, it'd have to be a very compelling case. And also, if somebody's really nearly full-time, it's easier, I think, to rationalize the benefits than if they just cross over the 19 to 20-hour line. It's not that, of course, by the rules of the game, that becomes a benefited position, but I think it's a harder case to make. So I guess I had a concern about that. We'll see what other folks on advisory think about that. But I guess I'm open to hearing the case, but from what I've heard so far, I guess I didn't see that one. The other thing that I guess I'd put to you as kind of a question is, with Ellen's announced retirement, seems like that would be an opportunity to do some big picture think about how Board of Health is staffing and what's the best structure and how does our structure compare to that in other towns? And is the structure we have with the opportunity to, bring in new people, is the structure that we have the best structure that we could, or would there be some other way that you might think would be a preferable way to structure that? And I guess I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on that, because it seems like with, retirement of a long-standing effective employee, there are, it presents a lot of opportunities, particularly, since you're thinking of creating a benefited position. It just seems like this would be a really fine time to do some big picture think about, well, what would be the best way to structure and staff, the work that Board of Health is doing. So I guess I'd put that to you as a question.
Okay, so let me take that one first.
Sure.
So I would say that both from going to MAHB conferences for 15 or something years, where we're with people from municipalities all around the state of different sizes and different challenges, different mix of work. And there is no optimal arrangement necessarily. It's more about who do you have who's available to do the work. And there's a fixed set of things to be done. And then that doesn't change depending on what your staffing is. It's then who's assigned to what. So towns usually follow models of who are their core people, and then how do you supplement that? And I'm saying that because we're also not like much larger, certainly urban cities have all staff. They don't rely so much on volunteers, and there's duplicate people assigned to various roles, where we're getting by with individuals who are doing certain pieces, and even in the for the specialized needs, the food inspections, the septic and well work, that kind of thing, animal inspector, then we're just using other people for a fairly short period of time. And that is very efficient. There is no downtime within the Board of Health. It's a service-oriented organization. When I was listening to the DPW session earlier, I was thinking, wow, it'd almost be nice to be able to point to potholes or guardrails because that's so tangible. But we do have our own version of potholes, and those are test pits for new septic systems or replacement septic systems. So the service follows the applications that come in for building or for upgrading properties. And I think somebody else was mentioning, planning board was mentioning how much extra work it is when there are all these big projects going on in town too. So the work is there. We have time pressures on the Board of Health because we're only given a certain number of days within which we have to respond by law to those things. So I can't think of any time. The staff never has a lull. There's always a backlog of things in the queue waiting to when they get up to the front of the queue to be worked on. Always, always. So when we've been talking about, who are we going to be able to find? Because it's very tough to find people, just like Conservation Commission, the public health arena. A lot of people got burnt out and frustrated by how they were treated during COVID. It's just a tough field. So I'm optimistic that we'll be lucky and we'll find somebody, and we're willing to be flexible depending on if it's the right person in some ways, but we need to, it's hard to know in the abstract who we're going to see. I think we're open-minded to some degree. We would like someone who is experienced would be preferable, but aptitude to take on new things and to deal with the understanding the technical side could also work, or someone who's willing to be trained and committed to it. So I think it's impossible to declare what an optimum mix is. And again, that's the way it is from town to town. Even in the shared services that we're doing, there's Sherborn, Dover, Medfield, and Needham. So Needham is quite a different animal just by virtue of size. That is a place with a department with lots of staff, that kind of thing. Medfield, their public health nurse does a lot of the Board of Health work. Like, that is the main staff person for Medfield. Dover happened to get someone who is, his skill set is more like our health agent, providing the technical services, and they have 2 administrative people to support that person. And Dover is just a little bit larger than Sherborn, but also has part of the town served by public water supply. So there is no magic formula. I think it is knowing how to take people's skill sets and get them involved in handling the tasks that are on our plate in an efficient way.
Yeah, so just to follow up, so I think you very effectively knocked down my perhaps poor choice of a phrase of optimal. I agree with you. There's no optimal way to do these things. It's always very context dependent and situation specific. That being said, again, this is really a question because it's absolutely not my area of expertise. But my understanding is some towns, for instance, have a person who, say, is a director director of public health, or whatever the right title is, or administrator, and that person would both do the office administration, and that person would be doing some of what the health agent does. And so, are you open to that sort of an arrangement? And it's
okay.
And I understand it depends on who you find, but this seems like it would be an ideal time to not just, well, let's see who we find and then we'll adapt, but who would you like to find? How would you like the pieces to fit together? And then at least have that as kind of a template and starting point when you go out to look for people.
That could be an option. That would mean basically changing a lot of things all at one time. Right now, we're under quite a time. I have no idea what we're going to do if we have nobody, because it
Right,
is
it's hard,
such
it's
a
hard.
detail-oriented
Hard. Of course,
um,
of course.
activity. It's regulatory, it's technical, it's coordination, timing, getting everything just right. The pieces have to be put in the right order and move together. It's not simple. So for example, our health agent was the health director in Ashland. And Ellen, the HR consultants who we worked with last year under the guidance of Personnel Board said that Ellen really is a director. When they compare her and what she does to other towns, Carlisle would be one of the most similar ones in a lot of different ways. In other towns, she is called a director. So it doesn't only have to be someone who goes out in the field. And frankly, Mark in Ashland would go in the field and do that technical work and then had administrative staff. He didn't, it would not, unless we were a much smaller town with far fewer projects than are coming in now, it would be impossible to have someone do both, the technical and the administrative, time-wise, unless they were willing to work phenomenal overtime. And I do mean way over. I'm not talking 45 or 50, talking much more than that. So,
So anyways, just a perspective. It seems like
no, and I
there's an
appreciate
opportunity
that.
to do
And
some rethink, do some thinking about the future.
we have already been having those discussions about,
That's great.
we have no idea who is going to be available and interested. And especially at the salary that we're currently at. Because we did have the benchmarking study done, and Sherborn is significantly below for the job that Ellen is currently doing.
So
And
let's.
So going back then to the issue of the administrative assistant, this is someone who is, actually, I should probably let Ellen speak to the details of her work, but she does a great job. She knows things. She is going to become very important in a month to have some kind of continuity and someone who knows their way around processes and just dealing with the public and whatever. Ellen, did you want to chip in on anything? I can't. Hold on.
What would you like me to chip in on?
So the
position or-
value of services provided by Jean.
Yeah. She's been with the board for 18 years. So she's experienced, she knows, she's superb at customer service. Which she will help people who come into the office looking for things, people who call or email. She just is phenomenal. She's ideal for public service. She does the turnovers with the fees. She does all the permit renewals. And by permit renewals, I don't mean septic or well. I mean like the septic installers, the haulers that come into town, all the food establishments, and the many, many, many food trucks that we're now getting. She works with the food inspector on those and gives them to me when they're ready for approval. So the board needs her desperately once I leave.
Yes, and I did want to mention too that we're not looking to barely tip over 20. So, and honestly, I would probably, now that Ellen is going, seek. I don't want to go to Jean until I have some idea of if it's even realistic that perhaps her hours are out more. But
Okay,
I would need some insight before asking her that.
All right, thanks, Daryl. Thanks, Alan. Let's pick up other questions and comments. Penn, do you want to start?
Thanks, Ted. Didn't Natalie have her hand up before me?
Oh, Natalie, did you have a comment? Go
Well,
ahead.
I had, but then I thought I'd listen to Penn. But then I'll ask the question. The BOH appointed official that went up 3.9%, that's Ellen's job?
Yes,
Okay. Then the permanent part-time that's going up 29.8% is this person that you want to give more hours to, right?
yes.
Okay.
And that would make that, and Natalie, it would make it a benefited position.
You know, they all are, Dan. Everybody, let's have everyone. But you do have a part-time casual position that's not funded, that maybe you could get some hours worth instead of course, making the permanent part-time into a benefited position. And we have it on good authority. There are plenty of seniors in town that are looking for work.
Yeah,
so we know that.
It's
right?
not something that someone could dip their toe in for a few hours a week.
Some of it has to be. I mean, talking to people on food trucks cannot, I mean, if you had someone who just did that, it can't be that complicated, right?
You would like to think
Really?
so, but Ellen, go ahead.
I don't know how to answer that. You do not have any idea of the number of certifications that a food truck needs to provide to the food inspector. There's a list of.
Yeah, but there's a list of them, and you don't do that anyway, do you, Ellen? Isn't it this
I'm
permanent
aware-
part-time person?
I do them if Jean is out. I do them. I get them eventually because I bring them to the board on an agenda.
Okay, well, you know, I just you know, you have a slot for another part-time casual. We know we have seniors that are looking for work. I don't, you know, that putting someone up 2 or 3 hours and increasing
The
their
casual
salary
person has
by
been
30%.
deleted.
You're increasing that position by 30%, right? Which goes way over what advisory requested.
The casual person was deleted. There's no one there in that.
I see that, but
And
that
that
doesn't mean
person
there
was
can't be.
$75 an hour.
But the seniors will work for cheaper.
So
there's got to be something you can pull out of here that you don't have to add someone 2 hours a week. You know, to that cost us $18,000 more a year forever. And then the next person, we're paying them in retirement, and then we're paying the next person. So we're paying 2 people for 22 hours a week eventually. And I just can't believe you've got seniors in here. You've got people. There's nobody in town that can take any of this load. It's got to be line 1 and line 12 or whatever, right?
Again, the board has to be so precise in what it does on following how things should be done. I'm not saying it's impossible to learn. It's hard for people to drop in and out of that. We can't be training up people periodically. It's a
I'm not saying
rule-bound kind of
train
setting.
somebody to do the whole job, but there's got to be jobs that you can, you know, some permit jobs that you could split out that aren't that complicated. You know, that you have a checklist, you get to know what they have to do, especially food. That seems to me like that'd be pretty. What about, you know, kind of easy, but I don't know, you know, but I just can't be so impossible that you can't break specific tasks out.
So did we just, I'm sorry to ask this, but so Council on Aging had a benefited part-time person last year to deal with increased workload.
Yeah,
Did we
everybody
just
wants
miss the
one.
year on this? This is really important,
Daryl,
essential stuff, so people
Daryl,
don't get ill.
I think this is a matter of, you know, making the case. And I think also with, you know, Ellen's coming retirement, you know, it's just, I think, not clear what structure you're going to land with, and, you know, whether in that new structure this would make sense or wouldn't make sense. I think that's where the resistance is coming from.
Okay,
let
but
me
if we found somebody exactly like Ellen, we still need more hours. And frankly, we're never going to find somebody who knows the ins and outs of this, because well and septic is not as common for towns to deal with.
Right.
And she is so incredibly efficient and knowledgeable that I'm doubtful one person is going to be able to replace her.
So,
and I'm very concerned about that. And to then be trying to supplement with a patchwork of inexperienced people who we have to train up, and again, for something so serious that the board could be found negligent if we don't follow all those rules and procedures for allowing people to bring their mobile food truck into town, et cetera. So it concerns me. And the board doesn't have the skills that the staff has. Even we know the topics, but we do not have the skills for maneuvering through the very prescribed processes.
Let's go to Penn and pick up a couple more comments.
Okay.
Penn, floor is yours. Go ahead.
Lower my hand. Thanks, Dan. So a few different things. So one, I sort of had the same, shared your concerns of others creating a benefited position. We've talked about that before. I also want to echo very strongly what you and Natalie were saying, is that, you know, with somebody who's had as much time in the job as Ellen leaving, in one sense that is of course a loss, but in another sense, I think it is presents an opportunity to, just as you said, Dan, and you're suggesting concretely, Natalie, just to take a look at how things are being done and seeing if they can be done in a different way, divided up, some way that meets the needs of the board, but also meets the advisory guidance, and also just keeps in mind, the sort of stringency that we're all looking at the budget with. And I think that's, it may be a tough nut to crack, but I think it's worth taking a stab at it. I also had a specific sort of historical question, since I'm new to this, new to advisory, but there seems to be a fair amount of bouncing, if I may put it that way. I'm pretty sure that's not a technical economics term in the salary, in Ellen's salary. Is that a factor of what, if I may ask?
I think Deb Seifring can help, but fiscal year 21, that was during COVID, and quite a bit of additional money was provided by the COVID funds from the state, the federal government. It's not included in that figure. Fiscal year 22, Deb changed it, and I think that came from ARPA funds that year. I'm not sure, but Deb should be able to provide that. So it was higher. And then fiscal year 23 went back to what it had been the typical.
Yeah, that's right, Ellen. There was a lot of because of the pandemic, Ellen was working an extreme amount of time. And so some of the money in FY21 was being paid out of the ARPA funds, and then there was an FY22, it bumped up. FY23 is a little bit more realistic to what, there was no supplemental funding that year. And then FY24, I think the hours increased to really reflect what she was actually working. So that's why it went FY23 to FY24 is a little bit higher.
Okay. Thanks, Ellen and Deb.
Wasim, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So maybe just a thought, like when you have the volunteers, it's probably good for tasks where the training is short and then the activity is, longer. So whereas it sounds like this is perhaps more of a technical regulatory type, activity, and so but the other question, the one question I have for Ellen and
Daryl, sorry,
and Daryl, yeah,
showing
I'm
his
sorry.
Michael Lesser.
No. Is does the Board of Health activity, I know, has increased? A lot of people during COVID were at home looking at their houses, making additions, making improvements. Is that something that is potentially going to level off or potentially go down, or that you don't foresee that in the next few years?
Hard to predict.
Because there was definitely a bump up, right? Wasn't
Yeah.
there a serious bump up during COVID? Everyone again is doing improvements and so
Right.
on.
I think last year I had data on the number of permits. I have to say I didn't count. Ellen, do you off the top of your head? No.
Off the top of my head, no. It varies slightly year to year, up and down, but it's pretty much linear. There's not ever a huge drop that would make any difference with hours. And especially now going forward with the 40Bs, the board's going to be just slammed.
Yeah, that has taken, it counts as one project, but those are huge and complicated. They take an enormous amount of time and energy.
Natalie, another
I
comment?
had a thought. Carol, didn't you say that to replace Ellen, you might take someone who wasn't even trained and train them yourself, right? You said someone with no experience?
I said that only in the context of we have been having discussions about who we might find. And if we can't find someone like Ellen, like, let's just think about,
Okay, so if you can.
There are other things. So we've been entertaining options for sure. This is very serious to us. And that's part of my concern is I can't even imagine what would happen if we don't have somebody in this role.
Okay, that has,
Again,
okay,
the board
so,
is not qualified to do what the staff do.
okay, so if you can train the person to replace Ellen that doesn't know it, you can surely train a part-time casual employee to do some of the clerical work.
I am talking about training. We can send whoever comes on, if they don't have the experience, there are many training programs offered for public health employees. So the Massachusetts Health Officers Association, the Massachusetts Association of Health Boards, and the Department of Public Health and others offer training. And if we got someone who was willing to do that, but they were inexperienced, and they had an aptitude for the technical and precision side that's required by the regulations, maybe that's where we'll end up, depending on
That's
what
great.
the pool of
Okay,
applicants
if
is.
you can do that for the main appointed official, right? But you said you cannot do that for this blank part-time casual. It's impossible to, like you you could do it for the top one, but you can't do it for this other position to hire another person to offload some of the money from the person you want to raise 30%.
Okay, I could say that there's one retired nurse in town who I could think of who would be amazing, but I know has no interest. I've already asked. So, but someone who had no experience with the field,
If you have no,
for them to do
if
it
you're willing-
casually,
if you're
this
willing to
part-time
hire-
casual person, just so you know what that line item was, again, we took them out. They were as experienced or close to as experienced, more a different balance of skills than our current agent. And they were there
Okay.
as backup. That was
I'm talking about
someone stepping in to fill in a few hours here and there. But coming with all the credentials and experience to do
okay,
so.
I'm just saying that if you put the hours from the permanent part-time, the 30% that you raised that person's hours, don't raise that person benefited and put it in the part-time casual and see if you can fill it without raising the permanent part-time. I'm not talking about the agent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Shelley, let's go to you.
I had a couple of questions. The first one is, Ellen, when are you leaving? Is this like an extended notice period? Or you?
Yes, I gave my notice in January. I'm leaving. My official retirement date is April 20th, and I'm taking my accumulated 6 weeks of vacation starting March 7th.
Okay, so you're effectively done March 7th.
Yes.
Okay. And then my another question I have is the part-time position. It seems as though this must be coinciding with the retirement, but what is the increase in the number of hours? Like what are the current hours, and then what's the ask here that that would be great.
So
Currently at 16 hours, which is not enough.
Right, and you want to go up to
personnel approved her for up to 25 hours.
Okay. And then
I just want to interject. So we did meet with personnel. They did approve it. They wanted to keep it on the lower end for budget reasons. So they put that 25-hour in there.
I'm looking at Form 5 and I'm seeing a 20. What am I missing? I'm seeing 16 in FY24 and I'm seeing, I think, a 20 and
yeah, and I put that in because I thought you would want a lower amount.
So the amount that it's getting populated over into the 512 expenses is based on the 20 hours?
Yes.
Okay.
But she approved.
So this 27,359 should be coming forward to here 27,359, and that's 20 hours.
Yes.
So that's not a full-time.
No.
But it just crosses over the threshold to become a benefited position.
The threshold's it's
19 to 20.
19 to 20. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, and then my next question is just, I understand how valuable it sounds like the Jean in her role is. Has there been thought, have we asked, does she have an appetite for moving up into Ellen's position with additional training if she doesn't have it, given her institutional knowledge? And then there might be potential to, backfill on the part-time, backfill like her administrative role with someone less experienced that might be a little easier for us to find in the job market.
Daryl, do you want to answer that or do you want me to?
I think you should.
Jean has expressed to me that she has no interest in my job due to the amount of stress and hours.
Okay. And then just in reading the budget here, it looks as though you only look like you have 2 full-time positions. Is that right? It's the health agent and then Ellen, your role, everybody else
No.
falls part-time, or is what?
I'm the only full-time position. The
Okay,
health
so
agent is budgeted for 13 hours, 12 to 13 hours a week.
12 to 13 hours a week. Okay. So that's okay. What's the hourly rate on that? Okay, 60. Okay.
68.93 in FY25.
Okay. Okay.
Which is reasonable and on the low end for
For the
the
market.
kinds of services he provides compared to what Dover and other towns
Got it. Okay.
have to spend.
Okay. Mhm.
And we also have a food and camp inspector.
Okay.
Shelley Moore.
Where are you guys, I guess, are you already advertising for the position, and where are we advertising for that right now?
So we know where we want to advertise. We are working with the HR consultant to so we have a very, very, very recently updated and fully approved by Personnel Board new job description, revised, updated job description. So it's very current for what Ellen does.
Okay.
Certainly the mix or the emphases of things could shift. Again, depends on the person, right? So
Okay.
the weighting of all the different possibilities is hard to know. And maybe Jeremy could speak to this too, but we did meet with the HR consultant to help craft what would go out in an advertisement, because it is difficult to find people in this field and to attract the right person. And we had discussions about really the benchmarking that had been done. And if we're not going to up the salary, what other things could be included that might appeal to people? And again, it may influence who we get. We're unlikely to draw experienced people.
So is this
So
gonna be filled by a
even-
temp during the?
Excuse me?
I'm sorry, it seems like in 4 weeks, it's gonna be
Yes,
critical situation, or is
yes,
there?
I agree.
Is there a plan to? Is there like a temporary position? Like, is there something that could come in on a temporary basis? I mean, this is
I
all gonna be handled
honestly
by.
am
Okay.
very concerned, and
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I've been busy with a family emergency for the last 5 days, but I haven't had a chance to talk to the town administrator on whether we got something back from the HR consultant just yet, because I want to post that a month ago. So,
Okay.
so just for reference, even though it's a lovely place to live, and it is an expensive place to live, but Nantucket, I think it's Nantucket, hired someone who was quite inexperienced, but did show a good aptitude in a different role within the community, and was hired at $150,000 a year.
Nora, did you want to jump in?
I'm just trying to understand the process, regarding Nantucket. I mean, it's, I think apples and oranges.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of,
Yeah.
we have the benchmarking study, again, that shows that Sherborn is at the very bottom.
My recollection from that benchmarking study, though, Daryl, it's a year since I read it, but when I read through it, it still felt to me, picking up on Nora's point, a little bit of apples to oranges, because there were different responsibilities in some of those towns for what that person did. So I had a hard time getting a clear read out of that report, as I recall from a year ago.
Okay, well, Jeremy and I and Diane just met with the HR consultants, and she did reiterate their process, which was they looked at a lot of towns and then they only selected for that benchmarking the towns where the duties were very similar. And so they felt that it was true benchmarking. It wasn't just plucking things out. It was trying to benchmark against Sherborn. So
Okay.
they didn't include some towns in there because they thought they were too different.
Nora, I interrupted you.
The
I'm so
original, I didn't, my question really was, just to help me understand a little bit, maybe people on advisory too, and possibly this is for Jeremy. At what was gonna happen when, March, is it March 7th or something, comes along and there is no, what happens? Can you just explain to me if we don't fill this? I know this isn't about the
Okay,
budget.
so if Jeremy's, I don't know, he can jump in at any time, Jeremy, but we did talk about whether we would have to look, as other people have done from time to time, for interim police chief or fire chief or interim Board of Health administrator is really what we came up with.
And has that been put out there in the universe? I'm just a little, as a citizen, a little concerned about that, just with septics and, even things like that. Does it
I'm
still,
extremely
does everything
concerned.
still kind of go along with the board or
No,
the committee? Mhm.
no. I am trying, we've also talked about if Ellen is willing to serve as a consultant, much as Gino has done for planning board, that if someone comes along and just when they have questions, because there's nothing like trying to do a task yourself, that even if someone told you how to do it, you say, yeah, but once you sit down to do it yourself, it's certainly different. Or you drive in a car someplace with someone, but you can't quite reproduce the route on your own, that they just be able to contact Ellen, who could walk them through the procedure. So that's,
Jeremy,
but
you,
again, we'd have to figure out a way to make that work and whether Ellen would be willing to interrupt her fun activities for that.
Jeremy, did you want to jump in on this?
I mean, I think, for context, it's difficult when a position that somebody's been in almost 38 years, has some, it's not consistent any longer. That I think it's scary and nerve-wracking for all, but I think that there's many options to fill the gap in the interim or to, this has been a good discussion, but there are consultants that you could bring on that could do some of the roles. As far as the well and septic, the current health agent, Mark, does a lot of that work. So it seems like there's some continuity on those. I'm not in the trenches like Ellen is daily, but turnover does happen in communities and we get through it. So I think you as a community, I think you want to look at what you think is going to be the best long-term solution for the community, and in the interim we'll get by. We'll find a way.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy.
So that budget, the fiscal year 24 budget is 73, but that's obviously not going to be used up unless it goes to an interim person. And then we're just gonna go ahead and automatically go to the 76 or 3.9, or is that, we're just kind of doing a placeholder there and see what the personnel board comes up with what you're offering out for a new position? Because only 3 years ago, it was $58,000. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm just, if it was 58 3 years ago.
There have only been COLA increases, but also the hours went up 5 hours a week.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All
I'm
right,
sorry.
other than that, it's only
Thanks
been
for that.
COLA.
Thanks, Daryl. Okay, thank you. Okay. Great.
Shelley?
So I guess, this conversation is making me a little concerned that these numbers are actually, low. Like, they're gonna end up being potentially not high enough to refill the position. Is that what I'm hearing, Daryl, like that we are
That's
low?
a concern we have and what we hear from others. Dover is the most recent example, 110 for their position.
Okay.
And they're very similar in the mix of things, but again,
And
They're
Daryl, does it,
bigger.
they have a director and they have 2 admins.
Okay, and they're bigger, a little bit.
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and that director does some of the inspections that our health agent does, right?
Yes, but not the administrative. And Mark does not do the administrative side.
So I
of
mean, it
the
is a
well and
different,
septic.
it's a
He is an
different,
in the field person
Yeah,
reviewing
yeah,
plans.
I'm just noting the
Yeah.
Dover job is a little different than this job.
And that is the model for some. Some people have the technical person being
Yeah,
called
yeah,
the
of course,
director full
of
time,
course, of course,
doing all the inspections, no separate food inspector, no separate housing inspector.
of course.
And again, as I mentioned, when I've met people from all sorts of towns around Massachusetts, people take what they're presented and make it work.
Right. Pat, go ahead.
Thanks, Dan. I guess, what I'm hearing from all this is I'm going to repeat my suggestion, but it sounds like there's no template for dealing with the needs of the Board of Health, and there are a lot of ways to juggle the different components and different different jobs, and so I think that go back to almost where we started the discussion. Think, perhaps it's a good time to look at the mix and readjust the mix to what we need and what's available, rather than trying to sort of duplicate what we've been doing, and view this as, as they say, an opportunity and not a challenge.
Thanks, Pat. So that might be a good place to kind of wrap the discussion, unless somebody has a burning thing to still, because we've covered a lot of ground. So Daryl, let me.
Dan, may I sneak in something or no?
Yeah. I'm just trying to keep it from getting too late. Go ahead.
Okay, just 2 quick questions. How come, if I heard you correctly, Ellen has been there for 38 years. How come I don't see longevity pay in this budget? And the other question is, most of the regulation you said a lot of technical and regulatory. Are these Massachusetts, or are these many of them are Sherborn specific regulation, in which case this is not very compatible with someone that does the job in multiple towns?
Most of the regulations are state. We have a few Sherborn specific, but 95+% are state and or federal kind of regulations.
Oh, so meaning someone that is experienced doing this job at another town. This could potentially be, someone, let's say, is overseeing and then has potentially other people working in Sherborn, for example.
I'm not sure I understood that they would oversee people working.
So the appointed official, let's call that person, let's say, a director. You could potentially have a director that covers 3 towns, right? So the cost of that director, let's say, is shared among 3 towns, and then you can have individual agents or part-time roles that are specific to each town. Is that model workable, given that the majority of the regulation and the technical work is really state level as opposed to really town specific?
I think what happens, so we're working within a shared services arrangement now, and it's not as simple. And even if you were sharing, for example, and again, Ellen is like a director, so director, administrator, whatever term you want to give to it. You would just need 3 people in that central organization. If it takes Ellen or someone like Ellen full time to do it, there's something, you can't just automatically share across because there's still a lot to be done. I know it's spend time in the Board of Health office. Anytime I would meet with Ellen, I would always bring in work with me because she's so busy. I would have to only talk to her during the gaps of calls and people coming in and things that had to get done immediately. It's a time pressured thing. It's not something you can ever really know what your day is going to look like. It has to follow whatever the flow is of needs from people coming in to the Board of Health. It's
So Nora, let's
just
give
a
you the last.
different
Just really,
animal.
really-
question.
oh, sorry, Daryl. Just really quick question. Then did I hear earlier then, just a little while ago, that there would be an opportunity to maybe blend the appointed official position with the food inspector or something like that, when you were saying some towns do more?
So I'm not sure appointed.
I'm just looking at Ellen's job with then a food
Okay.
inspector. Could there be
Yeah,
two?
I
I'm
just
just looking at the
didn't know that
titles.
it-
I don't know how many
It's not
towns.
really appointed, she's hired. So
I'm just looking at the Excel spreadsheet, sorry.
okay. Would it be possible to blend with, yeah, there are all different ways to divide things up. As I said, it's a public health nurse doing a lot of things in Medfield, but they don't do everything. They do the things that they have the skill set for, and the credentials. Some of these jobs you need very specific credentials to do.
Okay, I was just
It can,
thinking.
the
staff.
bucket of
Jer-
tasks to be
Jeremy,
done is the same. It can be divided up any number of ways. But it's still going to be the same number of hours, essentially, assuming everyone performs at a comparable level.
Thanks,
I was gonna
Daryl. Thank
jump
you.
in, but I think Jeremy can give us the better answer.
Oh, yeah, and I would just wanted to help answer a previous question as well on like longevity. But I think as far as the sharing of duty, Dover, for instance, it's the health agent director combination. I think it's similar in Carlisle as well. So those two roles seem to be the ones that other communities have blended together, that are similar to us and peers. As far as the longevity, the original version of the budget did include the longevity. If you recall, that was an initiative started at last town meeting. It was funded by free cash, and this is the first year it's included in the town budgets. The original initial version of this Board of Health budget did include the longevity for Ellen. However, once she announced her retirement, since should be retiring prior to FY25, that longevity would no longer be needed in this budget, so it wasn't included.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy.
And Ellen, isn't the person in Carlisle pretty much like you, that she's
Yes.
not
Yeah, she
she's
has,
not an agent,
she,
right?
well, they call her an agent.
Oh.
She inspects churches only, church kitchens.
Oh,
But
okay.
everything else, she's exactly the same as me. It's Linda Fantasia.
Okay. All right, so I wanted to just sort of, I think we should draw this to a close. So Daryl, you know, again, in the spirit of advisory, providing feedback, maybe more than you ideally wanted this evening, but lots of feedback. I think on the, you know, it's obviously your call, Board of Health's call for how to structure things, and I'm sure there are things I suggested that don't actually make any sense. But I think the bigger picture there is just, boy, to pick up on comments and people, it seems like there's an opportunity, as it sounds like you are, to be doing some thinking about, you know, what structure would work best given people that you might be able to find.
I think our current, I don't think there's any fault, except for we need more staff in general. Any fault with our structure? Again, it's used elsewhere.
Yeah, it's just
It's one of the common structures. But right, I'm not saying
yeah.
if I
Just
had
an
a
opportunity.
choice, I would, for simplicity and time savings, love it if we could find a clone of Ellen. But I also recognize that it's highly unlikely that we're going to find an exact match.
Yeah.
We will be forced to do some adjustment, and I'd rather hopefully post soon, but it begs the question, Jeremy, whether we look at two types of posting or something. I don't know if we invite people with different qualifications, but I'm also a little concerned about pursuing a big change abruptly, as opposed to something that we work into, just
Think-
because I think it would be.
Things to think through in the next little bit of time as everything as
Yeah.
it all comes together. The other kind of summary comment that I was going to offer is I think, given the conversation, I think expanding that position to a benefited position, I just don't think there's much support for that on advisory. So in terms of getting advisory to give a, green light to your budget, I don't see that. I know that's not the answer that you were looking for. And so, when we get to the public hearing, I think, much the same conversation would come up if the proposal is to, expand and create that into a benefited position. So that was my read of sort of where the conversation went tonight. And I know that's not.
I can appreciate that the goal is to not raise taxes. I'm a taxpayer.
Yeah, we all are, right?
But
all
I'm a
get those bills,
well-paid
we all get those bills,
volunteer.
we all write those checks.
But at the same time, it doesn't seem right that, people are working extra and that the board is spending more time on things that staff would be much better at doing, are more qualified to do. So I don't know, Jeremy, I hope you're still here. Well, maybe this is more a question for advisory anyway. I don't know how much consultants cost if we have to bring in a consultant to bridge. Is that going to consume our budget in a way that is not sustainable for us?
That seems like a question of how to bridge, when Ellen retires, how to bridge that. And that's a separate issue, I think, from the, does adding 2 hours or, adding a couple hours and creating a benefit. So I think that's just a separate issue. So I think, Daryl, I think we,
Okay.
kind of,
No,
we probably, talked about this about as much as there is to talk about. So let me just wrap up with a couple things. One, thank you for coming, and I know this couldn't have been an easy conversation, but really appreciate your, going through all of this with us, responding to questions, and, sort of reflecting back on, some of the comments and suggestions that got made. The other thing that I should have said at the outset is, Ellen, congratulations on your retirement. That's a wonderful thing to be getting to. Should have said that at the outset, but did want to slip that in before we wrapped up for tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, so unless anybody on advisory has anything else, then I would welcome a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, so let's do a quick roll call. Natalie.
Aye.
Mike Flanagan. Yes.
Aye.
Thanks. Mike Winters.
Aye.
Wasim.
Aye.
Shelley.
Hi.
Ben.
Aye.
Nora.
Aye.
Paul.
Aye.
And I'm I as well. So 9:00 adjourning at 10:21. Okay, thanks very much, everybody. And we are back next week to do police, fire, and DPW capital. Thanks. See y'all next week. Thanks for a good discussion.